Your mics are hot.
Welcome to the Drive. I'm Dale Lolley here with Matt Williamson. We are live here in Phoenix, Arizona, at the Biltmore in Arizona here, the Arizona Biltmore, I should say, for the league meetings here. Mike Tomlin spoke to the media for the first time this offseason yesterday, also addressed the media today at the coaches' breakfast here this morning. I say this morning, it is 9 a.m. here
right.
in Phoenix, whatever time it is, wherever you're listening. I know we have listeners all over the country. We're not used to dealing with this West Coast time thing, but
it's noon back home.
Noon back home, and that's why we are noon to 3 here live on SNR Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday this week here from the owners' meetings, and lots of stuff to dig into, Matt, about what Mike Tomlin spoke about. We'll get to some audio of that here coming up a little bit later. But this morning, I specifically asked Mike Tomlin, what's going on at the safety position.
Mm-hmm.
We know Terrell Edmunds signed last week with the Philadelphia Eagles. There are reports out there that DeMonte KZ has re-signed with the Steelers. So obviously, you have Minkah Fitzpatrick as well. But I asked him, what's the plan there? And he said, look, we still got free agency. We still get the draft. We're going to add somebody else to that room. He was asked about KZ. Can he play strong? And he says, look, the free strong thing is a little over
ambiguous a little bit. Right.
It
right.
just depends on how you want to do things. So I then followed that up with, well, could there be a possibility of Patrick Peterson doing some of those things as well? Because he did some of that last year in Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
He played in the box. He played deep safety.
Right.
And obviously smart enough to do that. And he said, they've already talked about that. So
a lot of things to unpeel there. I guess we'll start with Peterson. Is when they made the signing, I didn't foresee that happening. I thought he was going to be an outside corner. That's where he spent most of his life because he's been so good at it.
Yeah,
right. I mean, you're a Hall of Fame type of guy doing that outside the numbers. He's followed top receivers. But we've seen this through history. I mean, these great corners with size, intelligence, experience, Rod Woodson.
The Woodsons.
I mean, right, both Woodsons, plenty of them, can start to do new things, and at his size and his experience and intelligence, I think it makes all the sense in the world.
And ball skills.
Ball skills,
yeah.
right. I mean, he can be near the line of scrimmage. He's well over 200 pounds. I don't have a problem with him, matching up with Mark Andrews or Njoku or someone like that. But he can also go outside. And I also think that gives them nice flexibility in the draft. I mean, they're going to draft a corner. I think that's a foregone conclusion. But if it's an outside guy, if it's Joey Porter Jr. or whoever, that doesn't mean they're fighting for the same spot.
Right.
So that in itself, I think, is really interesting. And then the safety conversation, I think, is one we need to have too, because I look at KZ as a high-quality football player that's kind of a mini-me of Minkah. He can do a lot of the Minkah stuff. Minkah's special, and he's better at it than anyone. But the interchangeability, I think, makes those guys harder to play against, where Edmunds was a fine player, and basically through my whole career, there's been a strong and a free here, where a lot of teams just want similar dudes that can rock and roll each way.
Buffalo, for example.
Yeah, perfect one. So I've been wondering, during the safety transition, and they were a little slow to bring back Edmunds last year. Would they rather have two interchangeable guys, or do you want a strong plus two strong interchangeable guys?
I think ideally you want two guys that can take the football away.
Mm-hmm.
And, typically those are more your free safeties. Your
Sure.
strongs don't, they get their back to the quarterback a lot. They're in coverage.
Mm-hmm.
But Minkah's certainly capable of doing that.
Well,
KZ's capable of doing that.
As is Peterson.
And as
course,
is
right.
Peterson. The shortcomings of that was that you didn't want Terrell Edmunds in the deep post.
Right.
You could put him back there on occasion, but you didn't want him back there consistently.
Right. I mean, even in too high, it's not his best, and we've cited this a lot. I mean, along with like a Derwin James, over Edmunds' time here, he's aligned a lot more than people realize. I mean, he's been a slot, he's been in the box, he's been too high, he's been single high, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They've asked a lot out of him.
Yeah, valuable football player.
He was.
Yeah.
And I don't know that he was a master of any, but I mean, he was better and better and a high-quality football player, as you mentioned. So there's been a lot of talk of, boy, the Steelers linebackers aren't good enough in coverage. Well, I don't believe that to be true with Cole Holcomb in particular.
Yeah.
So
I don't know where that narrative has come from. We talked about it a little bit last week. Like, you don't have to be the best guy in the league at it. You just have to be better than what was there last year.
Well, that's the upgrade. I mean, you'd love them to be the best guy in the league.
No, absolutely.
Of course, but I mean, that's unrealistic.
Yeah.
But I do think, see, that's what brings me back to the strong situation, is if you had a Edmonds clone or a 215-pound, 6'2", strong safety body type, maybe you take Roberts off the field and he plays pseudo linebacker next to Roberts. So one thing I've noticed in a big way with this offseason is even the Gentry signing, which we'll talk about down the road, sets them up where, well, they can either take an inline tight end or a move tight end, or they could take a free or a strong,
Or no tight end
none,
for that matter.
Right, exactly. Like
however you want to handle it.
It's not your deck's a lot bigger. It's not there's 5 guys we're after. Well, now there's 15 to fit the bill that we'd all be happy with, and I think that's how they've set themselves up well.
It's always how they set themselves up.
Mhm.
That again, if the Steelers had to line up and play a game tomorrow,
Right.
they would be able to fill the starting 11 spots on both sides of the football. Right now, as we sit here.
Like, I'm not predicting this, but after their moves, they could be done on offense. They could not draft an offensive player and be able to line up and play with a better lineup than they had last year.
Yeah,
on offense. You know what I mean? So, I mean, they will add to it, but if they didn't, wow, this defensive player just falls in their lap over time and time again, they'd still be better on offense personnel-wise than they were last year.
Yeah, and the with such a young group on that side of the football, as I always like to say, guys are allowed to get better.
Absolutely.
And so you're going to continue to see that improvement.
Mm-hmm.
From year 1 to year 2 to year 3. That was some other stuff that Mike Tomlin was asked about. It was the acquisitions on the offensive line, for example.
Right.
Again, filling those spots so that you don't go into the draft saying, oh, everybody would say, well, Steelers need to draft offensive linemen. Well, you don't have to do it now. You don't have to do it now.
Right, absolutely. I mean, it's LaRaven Clark's not the greatest addition in the world, but his third tackles go around the league. I'm fine with that. I mean, and frankly, I think they're better at the third tackle spot than they were a year ago.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
So,
I mean, he's been a guy that's started on both sides of the line. He started the guard, so there's again position flexibility on your bench, which is critical. So I think that they've handled this very well. I think it's very much a continuation of what they've always done, and so it's an organizational thing. It's not an Omar Khan thing. It's not a Kevin Colbert thing. It's an organizational plan that they have every year. Hey, we want to go into the draft with the board completely open. Now, it was a little different last year. Everything was open except, but you had Mitch Trubisky there.
You did.
So, if you didn't get a quarterback last year, if somebody had taken Kenny Pickett ahead of the Steelers pick, they didn't have to take a quarterback.
They didn't have to. I mean, that doesn't mean they would have pivoted to Willis or Ritter or someone like that right away. I mean, I doubt that would have been the case. And you're right, last year was a little different. And there has been a couple of years that are a little different, where after the Bush trade or the Minka trade, they didn't have the usual picks. And this year's a little different because they got the extra one. You can really set yourself up for, we don't really need a receiver, but
this guy's there. Yeah,
right.
It's just too good to pass up.
Right.
It's the beauty. That's the beauty of doing things that way.
Mm-hmm.
When people talk about drafting the best player available, oftentimes when you have set yourself up positionally through free agency or however you've set your roster, you don't have to do something. Like there were years like several years in a row, Steelers have to draft a cornerback. Well, things didn't set up in the draft where you were picking at, all the top corners were gone.
Mm-hmm.
So so they just ignored that position. Well, they didn't ignore it; it just wasn't available to them. Yeah,
you're not going to reach.
Yeah,
you're right.
They get killed over the Devin Bush. They traded up to get Devin Bush. Well, they could have.
It didn't work out.
It didn't work out, but they had filled that position previously, and they had done it that year as well. If you remember, they signed Mark Barron that year as well.
Mm-hmm.
But they had looked at Devin Bush as a guy who was worth trading up for, so they did it. They didn't have to do that.
Right. I mean, to take it even deeper, and we kind of just talked about this a little bit, but like tight ends aren't tight ends anymore. Safeties aren't safeties anymore. Slots aren't slots. Corners aren't corners. I mean, there's an outside corner, there's a slot corner, there's a free, there's a strong, there's different types of tight ends. So not only have they not pigeonholed themselves for they have to take a tight end, they have to take a tackle. I really don't think they have to take a certain type of either.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
it's like the Leal situation last year. You
Right.
have to take a nose. Or what is Leal when you take him? Well, we don't know. We don't know yet. We just think he's a good football player.
Get him in here, and if you're really getting that vibe with the O-line.
Yeah.
We're just going to keep bringing in linemen we like, and we got a lot of time between now and opening day to figure out our top 5 and where they're all going to land. And I think that's true at a lot of positions right now.
Yeah, it really is. This next month here is going to be fascinating.
Hmm.
Pro Day's still ticking away here. We'll get into some other ones here early April. We'll see some of these guys who haven't had an opportunity to work out.
Yeah.
Devin Witherspoon comes to mind as a guy who
Hmm.
hasn't done anything yet at the Illinois Pro Day or the Combine, but he's got something scheduled here. First couple of weeks of April. So
See a lot of that stuff coming through.
yeah, there's a lot of moving parts here to this whole thing, and Mike Tomlin was asked about that. He says, "I just love the whole process. I mean,
You can tell
this is
he's into it.
yeah, this is his. This is like Christmas shopping.
Mhm.
It's
And he mentioned, I like to, even though it's becoming not as in vogue in the league, I want to be at the Combine. I want to be at the Senior Bowl. I want to be at Pro Days because there's things you can gather there that you can't on tape. And then he followed it up by saying, tape is still your resume. We still believe in tape, scouting. I'm paraphrasing more than anything. That's the most important thing. But being hands-on and being on the field, and I don't know a head coach that does it more at the Senior Bowl than coach, or travels to more pro days, and I think there's a lot to get from that.
I think there is too, and I think you heard some of that when Patrick Peterson had his press conference. Now he was a little different story because his cousin had played for the Steelers. Brian McFadden had played for the Steelers, but he talked about how cool it was. That Tomlin was there at his pro day, and
You remember these things.
yeah.
Right.
So guys, when they hit free agency, again, you're not going to get a chance to draft everybody.
No, of course.
But he was there in 2010 when Joe Hayden had his pro day. They drafted Marquise Pouncey that year, but he was there.
Paid attention.
Hey, Mike Tomlin's here.
Right.
Like I want to play for that dude.
Yeah.
Like
Hayden went 5th or 6th overall, and the
I
Steelers
think
weren't
he
that
was
market.
eighth,
Or,
somewhere in
he
that
was
range.
Go
You weren't
going
going
to
to get him.
Like I've been asked this, so will the Steelers pay any attention to the rookie quarterbacks this year? I'm like, they know they're not taking any of the top 5, but they're going to get scouting reports on all of them.
Yeah, you're going to play against
You're
that
going
dude.
to play against them. You might sign them like Trubisky
Right.
5 years from now or whatever, too. I mean, your report on these guys is always growing, and it starts now. So by no means are they going to ignore it. Will they spend
Maybe more so at that position
well, especially that position
than
Right,
some
right.
others. Particularly, I did a thing on my 5 for Friday a couple weeks ago about that 2018 quarterback draft class, or 5 of them drafted in the first round, and 4 in the top 10, which was a record at that point.
Yeah, right.
So if you look at it, the only one of those guys who right now, as we sit here, which is going to bring me to another point here in a second,
Sure.
is Josh Allen.
The
rest of them are all somewhere else.
Somewhere
and
else,
Baker
or-
Mayfield's on his 4th team.
right. And all in like a year.
Sam Darnold's on his 3rd team.
Rosen's done,
Josh
basically.
Rosen's played on 6 different teams. It's
I mean, there's 2 success stories out of the 5.
Yeah.
And one of them's career's in limbo right now, obviously in Baltimore, but he was obviously a success story. Allen's been a star. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, you look at this class, and the chances of 4 or 5 starters coming out of this class is slim and none.
Some of these guys are not going to be with the teams that draft them.
Right.
And this is what history tells us of these quarterbacks in this year's draft class. And there's probably going to be at least 4 in the first round.
I bet there's 5 in the top
Could
50.
be, yeah, 5,
Right.
5 in the top 50 with Hendon Hooker. History tells us that at least 3 of those guys probably end up somewhere else in the next 4 or 5 years.
Right, absolutely.
If not sooner.
Yeah, I mean, look at the Darnolds of the world and all these guys that are changing teams.
Rosen made it out of 1 year in
right.
Arizona.
They drafted Hughes the first pick overall a year later. So yeah, it's ever changing. Is Trey Lance a hit? Who knows? He's been in the league 3 years already.
We don't know.
So, right,
yeah.
There's a lot of that going on. So you need to be on top of all these quarterbacks. They could be on your team. You're definitely going to play against them.
We mentioned Lamar Jackson there, and there are reports today that he has requested a trade from the Baltimore Ravens.
Which is a step further than where this has been.
So we just got done with the coaches' breakfast here, pulling back the curtain. So what they do is they line up so the AFC got done. They were first. So they put all the coaches in, there's 4 tables set up in 4 rows. So they break them down by division. And Mike Tomlin's table was in the back of the room. So I was sitting there, but I was looking around to see which tables had the most people around them. The one that was right across from us was the Jets. There were about 100 people gathered around that table. And then the other table down, I'm looking down, and I see down the way, the other table that had a big crowd around it was the Baltimore Ravens and John Harbaugh.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
Because those are 2 teams right now, quite frankly, don't have quarterbacks.
They don't have quarterbacks as we
don't
speak.
have a quarterback under contract.
And I haven't given the Lamar thing a whole lot of thought, this next step of it. But if he truly is requesting a trade, not going to be a Raven, that doesn't leave him a lot of options for a starting quarterback this year. I mean,
Yeah.
who's available?
Yeah, I mean, free agency. I mean, we're only like 12 days into free agency, but the quarterback market in terms of starters outside of Carson Wentz,
Right.
is there somebody that you want to go get at this point? And I don't know that I want to go get Carson Wentz.
Right, 100%. And obviously, they could work a deal where a quarterback comes back in the trade, but it's not going to be nearly Lamar's
Once
quality.
again, that
I mean,
limits.
is that Desmond
Yeah.
Ritter or someone like Sam Howell or somebody like that? I mean, that's still a question mark. Maybe they could get the 4th pick overall off the Colts. Maybe. I think they're going to be in limbo this year.
I still think if I were running a team right now, and I know everybody's talking about this, well, there hasn't been much movement on the Lamar Jackson front. I would wait until after the draft. He's not going to sign that franchise tag deal.
No.
Before this, I'm waiting until the draft is completed. If I don't get a quarterback in the draft, or if I don't like the guys who are there, or I'm going to let's mention the 4th overall pick, the Indianapolis Colts. So I'm the Colts. I just take the best player available.
Right. Like, say you love Stroud and you love, Bryce Young, but they're gone.
But they're gone.
Like,
Yeah, you're not going to get one of the top 2 guys.
Right.
So why not then just wait until after the draft? Draft your best player available. Let's say you draft Will Anderson.
Yeah, or trade down, or
whatever, or do whatever, right. And then you sign Lamar after the draft. You're still going to have to give up 2 first-round picks for Lamar, but you're not giving up the 4th-round pick this year. You're giving up 17 next year because Lamar makes you
a playoff team.
Yeah, Lamar makes you a better team than you were this past season, and you're giving up whatever. Again, you're a better football team.
Yeah, and with all respect to the Jags, they're probably favored to win the South if you add Lamar and Will Anderson to that team, or certainly in the mix, and I think that is feasible. And then you're giving up a pick in the 20s, and then hopefully the next year it's 32. But I mean,
and we were talking about this at our breakfast this morning when we had breakfast. DeForest Buckner said I might not want to be here for a rebuild. Well, if they go sign Lamar,
don't trade me now.
Right. Hey, this looks a little different now.
Right.
How about we come back?
Yeah, exactly.
Let's run it back.
And now it's Odell wants to sign with you or whoever.
Yeah,
right. All of a sudden, everyone
now all
wants
of a
to
sudden you're a destination team. Well, because that's what having the quarterback does for your roster. Yeah. That's what having Kenny Pickett in place does for the Steelers.
Yeah.
Hey, Patrick Peterson talked about it at his press conference. When they signed him, hey, this is a team that I think is on the rise. They've got the pieces are in place offensively. You got a nice young quarterback there who's shown that he can do some things.
Looks
here.
like he belongs.
Yeah,
right.
and so I wanted to come here.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. And then you can build around that guy, as everyone knows. I mean, having a quality quarterback on the rookie deal is one of the best cheat codes in the league at the moment. And I expect Pickett to take a big step forward this year.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's all very interesting, and
it is. The Ravens are really
the machinations of this whole thing.
Yeah.
Just sitting like that. I texted this to you yesterday that some NFL futures have started to get released here.
Over-under win totals.
Yeah, the over-under win totals. We talked about the power rankings last week. I mean, I don't know how you power rank the Jets or the Ravens right now.
And
they don't have a quarterback.
Too. Right.
At least the Packers have a fallback plan.
So what I find really interesting around the league is there's 3 teams that have done nothing in free agency.
Yeah.
It's the Ravens, it's the Colts, and the Packers. Well, they're the teams being discussed with the 2 star former MVP quarterbacks. And then there's the Jets, who's also vastly being discussed, and no one's done more than them. Like they've taken vastly different approaches. But in a way, if the Colts really have been targeting Lamar this whole time, they're probably saving their money. And meanwhile, Green Bay and Baltimore have Rodgers and Lamar under contract, so they can't go get the left tackle or whatever.
Right.
So it's been hard on those teams.
Yeah,
they haven't done anything.
That franchise tag is a blessing and a curse.
Yeah,
in many ways.
I mean, some money tied up.
Again, having gone through the Le'Veon Bell situation and seeing how that played out, nobody ever thought that there was a chance that Le'Veon Bell wouldn't sign his franchise tag.
Right, and
it's a lot of money.
He did,
and that's what he did.
Took a different approach. Right?
Yeah.
So I mean, like the Ravens, if they do make a Lamar deal, it's almost like, boy, we just inherited $40 million though. I mean, they could make the Hopkins trade or something like that all of a sudden. But all of a sudden, there's no where do I spend it?
Where's your quarterback?
Yeah, right. Who's your quarterback, and where do I spend this newfound money? There's nothing to buy.
Yeah, it's do you save it for next year? I mean, without Lamar, are they rebuilding?
I would think.
Yeah.
I mean, I think even with Lamar, they're reassessing how they play offense. I mean,
Yeah.
they went out and got a pro-style coordinator. I mean, they're going to throw the ball more, but they're not adding receivers still.
Right.
I mean, no, you would think they would have picked up a wideout by now.
Yeah, the interesting thing is, I thought that, this was Mike Tomlin's quote of the morning. I thought he said that. Let me call this. He was asked about how is winning your division. Do you look at the other teams in your division first and what they're doing in the offseason, and is that how you build your team? He says, well, if you want to dominate anything, you've got to start in your own neighborhood.
Yeah.
In our neighborhood's the AFC North.
Sure.
So you have to at least pay attention to what's going on with those teams. I just wonder what the private conversations are right now in the Steelers front office about what's going on with Lamar
I wasn't
Jackson.
sitting right next to him, but I did overhear him say something along the lines of, "Hey, I've got no insight on Lamar." I mean, it's not his
that's what
bag,
he's going to say publicly.
But but he's going to pay attention.
Have to.
But I mean, the coaching staff, the advanced scouts are looking at the division right now, going, "Boy, I don't know. I can't really dig into my work with Baltimore. I might as well focus on Cleveland and Cincinnati.
What are they going to be? I don't know.
Why waste my time pretending like Lamar's going to be there or whatever,
Yeah. It's just fascinating.
the
We'll
wheels
see
are
how
always
this whole
turning.
thing continues to play out here. I don't think it's going to be settled anytime soon.
I don't either. I mean, maybe today, if he is forcing a trade sooner, maybe that gets the wheels spinning a little more. I don't know. It's just not. It's hard to find matches for him.
It really is.
Yeah.
And you got to play a specific way with him.
Mm-hmm.
You're basically.
I don't think any team would be as far the way the Ravens played
Yeah.
with him, because I think that actually handcuffed him to some degree.
I agree.
But you better have a very distinct plan in place.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Hey, we're going to take a break. He is Matt Williamson. I am Dale Lolley. You're listening to our live coverage here on Steelers Nation Radio from the Arizona Biltmore. We're here for the league meetings. Again, we're going to be here from 12 to 3 Eastern. For our time, it's 9 to 12. So the next, basically, a little over 2 hours remaining here in the show. But we're going to take a break. We'll be back with more right after this. Welcome back. I am Dale Lolley. He is Matt Williamson. We are live here at the NFL meetings here at the Biltmore Hotel in Arizona, and a Phoenix, Arizona resident here joins us, Max Starks. How you doing, Max?
I'm doing good, fellas. Good to see you at another event that's not a live football
This has
game.
to be great for you because every other time that we see you at Steeler games or at the Combine or anything like that, you're flying to come to us. We all came to you this week.
And I appreciate it. Thank you, guys. Please enjoy the sunshine while
we
you're
are.
here. You went to Weinberger, so you already hit one gym already in the city. So.
That place was tremendous.
Yeah, so we're good. We're
Okay.
good. This is fun.
Okay.
A home game for me.
It is a home game. So Max, since we last talked, the Steelers have made a bunch of moves. Free agency has been pretty interesting for this team
Yeah,
for the
it is.
second year in a row. Once again, building on that offensive line, 3 new guys coming in: LaRaven Clark. Surprisingly enough, all 3 with Eagles backgrounds. LaRaven Clark, Isaac Seumalo, and then Nate Herbig. What are the Steelers getting here with these guys?
Well, I think one of the things you're getting a quality depth, first of all, which is something that we were fortunate and blessed not to have major injuries last year, that we had to actually test that depth. But now you're getting some certified guys who've actually played football, who understand this. And, you know, with Isaac Seumalo especially, I mean, you get a starter that just literally came off a Super Bowl season. So a guy that has a lot of explosiveness, experience, and fits that mold of a guard, right? I mean, when you look at him, you don't question what he does for a living, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and so, but I think also, you know, with Nate Herbig, you're getting some guys on the outside. I mean, you get guys who have outside flexibility. I think when you're looking at LaRaven, you're looking at Nate. You know, Isaac is strictly in the interior, and you could say that they're all interior type of guys outside of LaRaven, but that's what we needed, right? Because that was the one area, if you're looking at upgrading the offensive line, you've got to be able to create that push. And the run game starts in that interior offensive line and then displacing human beings to be able to create those running lanes.
So obviously, to me, physicality, winning at the point of attack is stressed with this offensive line. These moves are screaming that. These aren't little human beings. These aren't movement-based players. I mean, they're tough guys. They're people movers, as you mentioned. So now you got 4 quality guards you can trust. Mason Cole had a good year at center, but some of those guys could emergency move to center. You have your swing tackle. So to me, if you're shopping in the draft, it's a tackle. You know, I mean, do you have a preference of right or left? I mean, would you be hesitant to move Chooks back to left if you drafted a right only, or if you drafted a Dawad Jones from Ohio State? He could redshirt a year and learn left. And I think the right-left thing is overblown in the league. Overall.
You did both.
Well,
yeah.
I did both. And,
Yeah.
and I was brought in as a right tackle. And then after 3 years, boom, they were like, hey, you can put him over to the left. And I'm like, all right, cool. I mean, I did this in college. So, you know, I think when we kind of get to that exclusivity, I know I could go on my soapbox and talk about kids being exclusively trained at specific positions
Sure.
from the age of 8. But offensive line, let's face it, it's the land of lost toys, right? It's the ill-fitting parts that on a football team, like, hey, just go play offensive line. And then you kind of develop into that position. But I think if you're looking at right and left, I think if you can get a guy who's smart enough, he might only have played right. If he's smart enough, you can cross over.
I thought all offensive linemen were smart.
Once again, there are levels. There are levels. Now, base average high Q is up here, where the rest of the team's kind of down here. Quarterback
Defensive linemen down
D-linemen are
here.
under the
Yeah,
Actually,
offensive
we can't
linemen
even
up here.
see it. It's actually not quantifiable. But
Real quick on a guy like Jones, I mean, he's only a right, everybody says. But if you draft him at 32, hypothetically, you don't need him to even play week 1. He could come in as your 6th offensive lineman. He could spend a year learning left technique. You know,
heavy tight end.
Right, that's what I mean. I think that's a great spot for any rookie to learn.
Yeah, so I think, and I think that's where the misnomer is. Like, oh, it's because he's only been presented with right.
Right,
And I
right,
think
right.
that's what you kind of say. That's because
The
that was the
first
only
round
thing
pick on the
available.
left side.
Yeah,
Right.
He can go play left if you need him to. Guess what? You switch the feet. You understand that. Okay, I need to flip things around mentally, get used to it. Like you said, red shirt or get a couple of games in. Because I didn't start out dressing when I first came to the Steelers in 2004. Like I sat out for the first 6 games because I was like, I got to be the swing guy, even though I played right tackle. My first game I went in was a Patriots game in 2004 because Marvell's like, I'm done. I was like, okay.
But that probably served you well. You're not starting week 1 immediately.
Yeah.
You got that 6-week stretch to kind of get your feet wet.
Yeah, get my feet wet, understand the program. And then my first game that I played significant time was not even at a tackle position. It was at left guard. It was week 16 or week 17, 16th game of the season. in Buffalo, we had already sealed up the number 1
I
seed.
remember that game. Yeah.
And Alan and Jeff come out and they're like, we're not playing. Go ahead, Rook. I was like, oh, well, Chucky's going in the center. Well, where's the guard? You're
Where's
the only
the
other guy
guard?
dressed. So I went and played left guard for my first time in my first game of my career as a left guard, going up against Pat Williams and Sam Adams.
Yeah. All Willie did was run
only
for
370 guys. I mean, they're 370 apiece.
Willie went for about $1.50 that day.
Yeah, exactly. Outside toss zone because we weren't running out the middle.
And I'm sure this was true in your day, but certainly growing up, right tackles dealt with the power players. Left tackles had dealt with the speed rushers. That's not even close to being true anymore. T.J. Watt, the Bosa brothers, they all come from the
Von Miller's
from
on the right side.
Right.
Von
I mean,
Miller.
I think the big, heavy guy on the right is a misnomer in a big way now.
No, it is. You have to be just as athletic on the right side now as you do left, and sometimes even more because, like you said, the premier pass rusher, he's not staying stagnant. He's not just coming from the blind side now. If he is a right end, left side, he can also walk over the other side, depending on the scheme. They're going to try and find the biggest mismatch, so you can get guys lining up at the guard position. So you have to be just athletic as an offensive lineman and versatile at all the positions, outside of center, because center is a different skill set in and of itself. But the other 4 positions, you have to be fluid and flexible.
So you just mentioned the pass rushers moving around like that. If a guy did that and all of a sudden you look up and Myles Garrett's lining up consistently across from you, you get ticked off about that?
Yeah, you take that personal.
Like
You're
they think I'm the weak link.
I'm Waldo.
I was the fresh fish on the catch of the day report. I was like, no. So now it makes me wonder, like, okay, so you identified me as a weakness. You put your best guy over me, and he's coming over me every play. All right, I got to show now that my weakness is a strength, and I think it also helps those guys to understand, hey, you got to study everybody across the line. 'Cause I think that's the other thing.
That makes
Say,
a good
I'm
point.
just a right tackle, so I'm only going to look at right tackle film. It's like, no, you need to look at the left tackle film. You need to look at that flex guy that comes in on third down. You need to understand all 4 of those guys because guess what? A twist happens. Now you get that D tackle.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's the other part that coaches have to really get up to speed with players and them understanding because, when you go to college, they hand you the notebook with everything every week, and they have this other company doing scouting reports for you that they send in to you. Now you have to do it yourself. The pros, they don't do that. Like the pros will give you the notes and the tips, but you have to use your own knowledge, and you have to understand I need to know everything, not just that one spot.
Right.
And the Eagles epitomized this last year and had great success. You're not only getting 4 dudes. I mean, you might get 8 or 10 that you have to block on that specific day. I mean, you might get Hargrave, you might get Reddick. I mean, could they be any different? You know what I mean? Right.
Exactly. Or Fletcher Cox, you get the
Right,
honorary
right.
old vet.
Yeah.
That just
Brendan Graham,
give you
right.
power. Yeah.
I mean, everybody's going to try to bring hockey waves for linemen, and they're fresher than you are.
Yeah, they want line shifts, and that's the other thing for offensive line. Like we have, I know they look at us and you look at the body dimension, like, dude, this dude's out of shape. It's like, but we have to be in a special condition because there's no.
You're not leaving the field,
right.
Hey, guess what, guys? I only do first and second down. I'm not a third down specialist. Third down pass rush offense specialist. No,
I've
you're
only
in for
seen that
everything.
once.
Yeah.
And that was the one year with the Steelers when they ended up having to kick Fanek out to
Matthias.
with the tackle. So if it was a run play, Allen was inside. If it was a pass play, Allen was going out to tackle.
And you have a Hall of Famer, you might get away with that. But otherwise, it's a bit of a tell. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so that's where you have to be able to combat that, and I think that's what also kind of stunts when we're talking about the evolution of an offensive lineman, right? And how that position hasn't grown as much as the other positions, right? I mean, pass rushers get bigger, stronger, faster every year. Linebackers get cat-like quickness. They get sideline to sideline, and DB guys, are just that much faster. But offensive line has been one because you have to be so convertible to all conditions, right? That there's not as much like, oh my gosh, I'm going to see the next Tony Baselli. And then that guy ends up.
Fewer of those come in the league nowadays.
Fewer come in the league. And then when you do have a Lane Johnson or you do have a Tyron Smith in his area, right? When you get those guys, you're like, I got to keep that guy, Joe Thomas. But those guys aren't walking through the door every day. So you have to have a guy that's all conditions, purposeful. And now you look at like a guy, Orlando Brown, who just will now be in our division. But he was an uncommon type, right? He's only going to be a right tackle. Then he gets pushed out to left. Oh, he's not a great left tackle. Well, the dude just signed a huge deal.
Yeah. It's more than good enough,
to be a left, but he started out as right and has shown that I can convert. Oh, his feet aren't quick enough. That's okay. He's got long, gargantuan arms.
Right.
So it's like,
extra
why
step
do you
to
need
get
the
around
feet?
them.
Right.
So it's tough, and I think that's where you haven't developed that because we're not shifting out like a defensive line. We don't have special purposes. We have to be ready for everything. That's why it's more important when you get a guy who is athletic. I think flexibility is really the biggest thing. How good does this guy bend? And then also that brain up top. How can you disseminate information on the fly? Those are the two biggest critical things to building a good offensive line. It's not how many times you can bench press, because you get arms like this, and you're like, okay, I'm only going to get 25 times.
Yeah.
I'm not going to set the NFL record.
I'm not getting the
for most
40.
bench press. Yeah, I'm not even getting in the 30s. But that's what it is. So I mean, it's so tough, and that's why you never understand how unlikely those guys are going to be. But it's great to see that we have that depth here, and that you have a Chooks, you have a Dan, now you have LaRaven, who can kind of move around and help you out in some situations. Like you said, also teach a guy at the tight end position. You're going to draft one in day 2. Find that guy who can possibly be a plug-and-play guy that can play across the line.
Well, let me ask you this, Max. So if you are, say, Kevin Dotson in the last couple of weeks here, and you see all of a sudden the Steelers adding a bunch of players at your position, or even, I mean, for that matter, James Daniels, how are you approaching that as a professional?
Pissed off.
Okay.
I mean, that's essentially what it comes down to. Because,
Yeah.
I mean, look at when I came in, right? I was a third rounder in 04, and I was like, okay, I'm behind Oliver Ross and Marvell Smith. I'm like, okay, maybe I can compete for the right tackle. Then they draft Trey Essex, following year, same round, third round as well. Oh, and then, by the way, the year after that, we're going to take Willie Colon in the 4th. Okay, and the year after that, we're going to take Tony Hills. We're going to bring in a Jonathan Scott. I mean, so every year, Mike Adams,
Just get
Marcus
used to
Gilbert,
it, right.
Yeah.
You just get used to that competition year, and I'm like, okay, that's the new mark. I have to come in, and I have to be better than these guys to make sure I keep my position. Every year was a competition, and that was one of the things that I thrived in that, and I actually wanted to help those guys. So I'm like, shoot, if I go down, I need this guy ready to go. I can't treat him like he's the enemy, but at the same time, I also know that that's the rabbit. I had to stay in front of that rabbit right there, because he's the one that's trying to get in front of me. I need to keep pace. So, I mean, it helps as a motivator. So hopefully that's the same thing for Kevin. It comes as a motivator, and it's not one of those things where he kind of negatively internalizes, like, man, they want to get rid of me. It's like, no, they're pushing you for competition because you didn't have any last year.
Yeah.
Like Kendrick Green, there was no threat of Kendrick Green starting in place of Kevin Dotson. I mean, he dressed completely in street clothes for the entire year.
Sure.
So now you need that guy who can push Kevin, or
Kevin becomes the guy who's pushing.
Yeah, Kevin becomes the guy who's pushing. Yeah, pressure, right? Diamonds, right?
Yeah. Become the pusher or the pushee.
Yeah.
That's
Only two things.
I always looked at it this way. I mean, I've never been in your shoes or a player's shoes, but if that player doesn't take it personally that I used a first-round pick on his position, or that I took Myles Garrett from right and left the lineup against him, he's probably not mentally tough enough for this league.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one thing to be unbothered, but there's another thing to just be completely aloof, right?
Like, oh,
Yeah.
all right. It'll be all right.
This is just another guy in the room.
right.
Oh, I'll just wear a sweatsuit this week. No,
That's not going to cut it, right?
That's not going to cut it. And you're going to be in the street.
Yeah, I mean, do you want to play or do you not want to play? And and so I think it again raises the level of water for everybody. Everybody better up their game if they want to get on the field. And I think when you look at what they've done with that offensive line, is they've added a lot of competition there.
Yeah, and a lot of competition, a lot of quality depth. That hey, if you don't end up the starter, boom, you're going to be in the starter and waiting position. You're going to be in the hole.
It's not going to happen like it did last year, where they play 99% of the snaps.
No,
that's just not realistic.
That is absolutely an aberration, and it's something that you appreciate, right, for that year. But we all know that has a cumulative effect in years to come. That there is going to come something that's going to come to head, and you want to make sure you're prepared for it, because you remember a couple years ago, San Francisco, right? They go to New York with a full team. They leave with about 10 guys on IR, and you don't want to be in that situation where you're scrambling. You want to have guys who are quality in place, and I think that's what you did. You added not only potential capable starters, but guys who could be quality depth guys who could be prepared at a moment's notice.
So if you ask any offensive lineman, continuity is unbelievably important. You've said this. Wolf says this. Every lineman I've ever come across, playing with this guy next to me, Wolf always talks about, we just grunted and everybody knew what they're talking about. I mean, and I think there's a lot of that to be said. And I think the short answer to the question about the answer is no. But because those five played together 99% of the snaps, they created a lot of that. And you're going to rock that boat a little bit. I mean, there's a long time between now and opening day, but is there any concern with that?
I don't think there's a concern, like I said, if the guys also have the mental state coming into this. Like if that five comes in and they look like they have not missed a beat since the last snap of the last game, it's not going to be a question.
Mm-hmm.
But if there is uncertainty, somebody comes in a little overweight to OTAs, somebody is a little delayed, or they had some type of workout injury and that guy's not available.
Sprains an ankle in minicamp or
Sprains
whatever
a
it is.
camp.
Right.
It's like, now this is the fire drill. So you got to kind of disrupt that a little bit, because you also got to ease these other guys in. You don't want them just coming in and learning. If a guy's back, you got to put a guy up and see if he can do it in the moment. So it's a constant just turnover of attrition, and then you're going to mix lineups up in OTAs anyways,
Right.
just to see what the competition and the fit looks like. I want to see how this double team looks with Isaac and Dan versus Kevin and Dan. Or I want to see how this looks like, okay, let's throw LaRaven in next to James Daniels just to see if it's going to look good, because you want to just get a full-on look to know, hey, we don't have to go in the draft and go get somebody, or we don't have to go late free agency, one of the guys, and get a street free agent before training camp because we don't like the way it looks. I don't want to get to training camp and be like, this is a nightmare,
Now what do we
and,
do?
I could have done it.
Or I'm one injury away from disaster.
Yeah.
Yes.
The key is having a bunch of, as Mike Tomlin likes to call them, NFL dudes.
Yes.
Guys who have been there and done that. And I mean, if you've got 9 capable linemen on your roster,
Most teams
you're
have
better off
4.
than 90% of the teams out there.
Yes.
That's just the reality of the situation in today's NFL, and you know, you're going to need that depth. You just are. I mean,
well, and to quote Terrell Austin, right, when he talked about this last year, he's like, I need three starters at cornerback to get 2.
yeah.
You need
Right,
7
right.
capable offensive linemen to get 5.
It's really the same thing that they did last year at cornerback when they went out and signed. You know, I mean, you had more guys than you had spots, but again, created that competition. You needed all of them, and that, you know, the first 6 games of the year, it was a mix and match of who was available that given week.
Well, and then you remember at one point only Terrell Evans was a
Yeah.
healthy guy.
Yeah, right.
Everybody was literally brand new.
All that
brought in
depth
off
that they
the
had,
streets.
all the depth they had in the defensive backfield was like, whoa, what happened there?
Yeah, got none of them. I mean, 5 guys go down.
And I can promise it, if you go week 10 of the 2023 season, there'll be 10 to 12 teams that have 3, 4 offensive linemen. I mean,
Yeah.
under 5.
Yes.
There's no question. And
Yeah.
Steelers are less likely to be one of those now.
Yeah, exactly. With this depth, you've solidified that opportunity to make sure that you are a fully bolstered group.
Well, we're going to take another break. Our guest has been Max Starks, a former Steelers offensive lineman, and of course, he is part of the game day broadcast, and appreciate that. You can also hear him on Steelers Nation Radio with Wolf and Starks during the season. You guys will be kicking that. It won't be too much longer now. You'll be kicking that back off.
It's that the off season seems to get smaller and smaller.
Yeah. Like we were at the combine yesterday, and the draft will be tomorrow. And
Exactly.
But he is Matt Williamson. I am Dale Lolley. You're listening to us live from the NFL owners meetings here in Phoenix, Arizona. We'll be back with more on Steelers Nation Radio right after this. Welcome back. I am Dale Lolley. He is Matt Williamson, and this is Steelers Nation Radio. We are live from the NFL meetings here in Phoenix, Arizona. We're at the lovely Biltmore Hotel. We come here every other year for this.
Yeah,
so
right.
The other meeting, so they do meetings here in Phoenix every other year, and then they go to somewhere in Florida.
Somewhere east is how it
Yeah.
was explained to me, right?
Typically,
West Coast
yeah.
and East Coast,
Yeah,
too, right?
but this is the
Usually
West
Florida.
Coast, yeah.
And this is the West Coast spot, huh?
I think
Great stuff.
they've got a nice setup here. It's everything's pretty.
It's easy to get to, all in all, and
Yeah.
right. It's a beautiful town.
This place,
obviously, too.
the Biltmore here can hold everything, and
We're staying right just
great
down the road,
historic
too, and,
hotel and golf course,
beautiful,
and
right.
everything that the NFL wants.
Sure.
But,
No, it's been quite an event so far. Eye-opening to me, and I've enjoyed the heck out of it.
Yeah, Matt's maiden
one.
voyage here.
Exactly.
So taking this all in. So again, we had the AFC breakfast this morning. Well, we had the NFC breakfast as well, where all the coaches kind of, they set them up in tables, and people pepper them with questions. And of course, we had Mike Tomlin yesterday for the local media, a chance to sit down with him and have an extensive talk. The first time he had spoken this entire offseason, so there was a lot of questions, obviously, about free agency and things of that nature. But he was asked, as I mentioned before, about Patrick Peterson. And I said, look, that was, he's a guy that we identified that we wanted to bring in just because of his, not just his physical ability, but what he brings you to your room and your team above the neck.
Yeah. I do think there was I heard some blowback. Why would you sign someone that age at that position? Well, first of all, he's playing very well still.
Yeah.
And, and as soon as that happened, Sutton goes to the Lions and the Steelers react by getting Peterson. Okay. I mean, I immediately thought that's a very different style. But we talked about this in the first segment. I think they might ask him to do more Sutton things. And I think at this stage of his career, it's a good move for the player as well.
Yeah.
And my first thought, the second I read the blurb, Steelers side Peterson, is, wow, what an ideal mentor for the draft pick that's coming. Which I think is coming.
Because like the first 10 years of his career, or eight or nine at least anyways, he was a shutdown, lockdown cornerback.
Oh, yeah, he's a Hall of Famer.
Put him on the island and just, you got that guy.
Yeah, exactly. And he can do more than that. And if you study the player, all those LSU defensive backs that came after him, and there's a long list.
Bevy of them, yeah.
Honey Badger, Stingley, blah, 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 all the way down the line. He's the guy they look up to. A lot of defensive backs look up to Dion. Well, all the LSU guys look up to Peterson. I mean, he's kind of like the big brother, the uncle that's been around the block. Pat Pete, they all love him. So I think he'll be a fan favorite around here. He is older. I mean, could he decline? Absolutely. I mean, not everyone can play forever, but I mean, I think it's a good spot.
The thing is, for a guy like that, who ran a 4.38 40 at his combine at 200 pounds, 200 plus pounds.
He was 218 in his combine.
Right.
Big corner. Right.
big corner. I mean, those guys, those premier athletes like that, they're going to decline a little.
He already has.
More gradually.
Yeah, well, that too.
Than
right.
your average, I was a 4.5 corner coming out, and now I'm a 4.65 guy. Well, there's a big difference there. If Patrick Peterson's still a 4.5 guy, he's still better than most.
Because he's better above the neck than ever.
Yeah.
You're right. And he probably doesn't pivot and change directions as well as he did. If you threw him in the combine this year, it wouldn't be pretty. I mean, because it's not this. It's 12 years removed or whatever. I mean but he on the field makes up for it in a big way. And again, I loved hearing some of the stuff you guys have been talking about of maybe he plays some slot, maybe he moves closer to the ball. Jalen Ramsey's doing that stuff a lot. So it makes sense because of his size and football intelligence.
I mean, he had 15 pass defenses and 5 interceptions last year.
Got
his hands on the ball a lot on a bad pass defense.
I'd say it's one of the worst pass defenses in the league.
Yeah.
I mean, they had a couple pass rushers, but their pass defense in general was poor, and he wasn't one of the reasons why.
Right. But they did different things with him, and so you wonder, like he talked about it at his press conference, it was more zone type, and we've talked about this as well. I think it was only 17% of his snaps were man last year. So does this signal a change in what the Steelers are doing?
I sent you a really good article that Warren Sharp wrote for Fox Sports, I think it was, just last week, and he was looking at massive trends across the league. And at a rapid pace over the last 3, 4, 5 years, the league as a whole is going to much less blitz, much higher two high safeties, much more zone. So you're getting four
The
pass
reason
rushers.
for that is because so many running quarterbacks are coming into the league.
Well, and analytics have told you can't give up the 80-yard bomb.
Yeah.
So we're gonna, if you can nickel and dime us to death, so be it. I mean, so in that regard, I think that every team is playing more zone, rushing four. I mean, Blitzburg isn't going to be a thing where you ask Peterson to run with Jamar Chase for 60 snaps a game. You know what I mean? They're just not going to. No team's asking them to do that. Lester Hayes and Mike Haynes in the day, just up there pressing people. Mel Blount, that's not what the league is now anymore.
Yeah,
So
and it hasn't been. I mean, that's when people talked about the Steelers playing Tom Brady and they can't just go out there and play zone against Brady. Well, you're playing some man against Brady, but they were doing what their corners could do at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But B, you can't just go out and play man against those guys either. You can't just do one thing.
You think Gronk can get off man coverage? You know what I mean? And the Steelers, by the numbers I've seen, are a higher percentage man team than most. They were 7th or 8th in the league. But it's still less than, league averages drop so much that it's still not a high
like
percentage.
The highest percentage team is 45%.
Yeah, right. And a lot of it's situational. Like, we're not going to back off on the 6-yard line. You know? I mean, if we're in tight quarters, we're not just going to play a soft zone.
If it's 3rd and 14, we're playing zone. Like
Right. Tackle the catch. And so I think that's been a little overblown. Steelers are a big man team, and Peterson's better in zone now. Okay. I mean, there's some truth to that. And if it doesn't work out, maybe that's a reason why, or he loses 2 steps. But I think it's a very good calculated risk when you really look at the percentage of these things that are truly take place on game day.
I honestly think, and this comes based off of what Mike Tomlin said today, it would not surprise me to see Patrick Peterson as your dime linebacker or a dime. Like, he's just put him in the middle of the field, let him keep his eyes on the quarterback.
Mm-hmm. And that's what the Rams do with Ramsey.
Right.
I mean, they're both, one's a lot older than the other, but Ramsey's up in age now too. It's easy to avoid Ramsey if he's on the outside all the time.
We just don't look that way. Yeah.
Right. I got 3/4 of the field to work with, and instead of dealing with him, so they play Ramsey as a star position, which is a big nickel type. Roaming around. Not that he's freelancing, but I think Peterson could easily do that. I mean, I think he can come up and tackle Nick Chubb, at the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of that signing, and so we will see how that plays out here.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly, Mike Tomlin has had those conversations already with Patrick Peterson.
Yep.
So
I know people worry, who's the slot? Well, right now, I think it's KZ, Minka, and Peterson.
Yeah.
And Millet's still on the team.
And Millet's still there as well.
It's just a different version of the slot.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to take another break here at the top of the hour. He is Matt Williamson. I am Dale Lolley. You're listening to The Drive here on Steelers Nation Radio. We will be back with Hour 2 live from the NFL meetings here in Phoenix right after this. Welcome back to the Drive. I am Dale Lolley. He is Matt Williamson. We are live here at the NFL owner meetings here in the lovely Biltmore Hotel in Phoenix. This is I always love coming to these things because, well, I don't get to come to places like this.
I don't think my family
in real life,
too often. Right. So any chance you can get in a place like this is cool with me, right?
Rub shoulders here a little bit. Yeah, lots of stuff going on here. Just looking at some of the stuff that came out of the meetings this morning. And it looks like Josh McDaniel said that the Raiders could absolutely draft a quarterback this year, even after signing Jimmy Garoppolo. There's a lot of that going on. Yes, a lot of teams could do a lot of different things. You don't want to pigeonhole yourself into one thing here.
100%. I was about to say the exact same thing. And, of course, it's lying season. No one's going to be like, we're definitely taking a quarterback or we're taking Paris Johnson or whatever. They're not going to tell you that. It's lying season. But moves tell you things. I mean, we harp on that this show all the time. You got to kind of pull through the tea leaves. And Jimmy's kind of like the Steeler conversation we had in the first segment. Like, you could be fine this year with
absolutely.
him.
He's gotten teams to Super Bowls and NFC championship games.
I mean, if you're the Raiders,
I don't see him doing it with the Raiders, but that's
not this year. But I mean, I don't know that it would be a drop off from the quarterback play they got last year.
But he's an NFL quarterback.
He's an NFL quarterback. Durability is my biggest concern with Jimmy, and he does have a ceiling. But if you're, if we were sitting here doing Raiders radio, you're probably like, well, Young and Stroud aren't going to be there. But what if we love Richardson and hate Levis, or vice versa?
Well, and that's where Jimmy gives you some options there. If you go out and get a quarterback this year, you can have him sit and learn behind Jimmy for a year.
Right. I mean, he's a good mentor. He's considered a great teammate. He's been around the block. He's been to Super Bowls. He's won a lot.
Jimmy
of
would have to be the one like,
this is all I ever do anymore.
Hey, right? What's going on here?
Right. But he may have found his niche in life too. I mean, I don't think
he's that guy.
He's going to be that guy, and a good one, a higher end version of that. So it's interesting. I mean, they obviously have a lot of defensive needs. They could get an offensive lineman there as well. The Raiders are an interesting team. I mean, I think they made a mistake a year ago. Like when they made
going for it. Yeah.
I think they pushed their chips in on the Vegas, table there, the poker table, and probably should have pulled back and said, let's not trade for Devontae Adams, and maybe we should sell a piece or two as opposed to, going all in to try to win today. I mean, especially in the Chiefs division and all that. And I understand doing it, but they're paying for it a little bit right now.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, that's the again, if you're going to go for it, you better win.
Right.
Did you see the stuff?
And most don't.
Yeah. Did you see the things the Rams put out last week? Well, the statement that they're raising their ticket prices, and they're like, well, we went for it and we won. But then we got to pay the piper with right.
All
that.
I'm less apt to go to a game this year. Than
all that
years ago.
them picks is out the window now. Now it's like, give us more picks. We want more picks.
Right. I mean, and Tampa's going to be in that situation too. And fortunately for those two teams, they have a ring to show for it.
Yeah.
Most teams, the Browns last year, the Raiders. I mean, there's 10 teams probably last year that pushed their chips in and lost.
Yeah, I mean
and you usually do.
And the fan bases don't react well to that, nor do owners.
No, but there's a lot of off-season excitement. If you're a Raiders fan 1 year ago, we just traded for Devontae Adams. We're going to win the Super Bowl. You know what I mean? Right.
Oh, yeah.
A quick Raider move that we didn't talk about that I heard described this way was, I think both of us did. Like, why would you sign Jacoby Myers when you have Renfro? And I heard them, some beat reporter, and I forget who it was, basically looked at it this way: was they could either pay Myers or pay Waller. But they decided, I'd rather have Myers and the third-round pick from the Giants than Waller at his age and injury history. And if you look at those two versus each other, it adds up a little more as opposed to Renfro versus Myers. So it's just, Waller's a big slot anyway.
Yeah. Speaking of free agency, as we mentioned, Mike Tomlin spoke with the media yesterday, and I wanted to play back some of the clips of that today here on the show. So let's hear from what Mike Tomlin here had to say here. We're going to break this up, and it was about a 30-minute interview. We'll break this up into some clips and talk about what he had to say a little bit more here. So here's what Mike had to say yesterday to the assembled media.
For us,
clear.
Don't view free agency in the draft any different. We got two major ways of improving our team and acquiring talent, and so we respect both components. We utilize information for one as it pertains to the other, and so we're excited about what we have been able to do thus far, but we're also excited about our draft positioning because there's a second component to this thing in terms of the acquisition of talent. But specifically in the offensive line, we just thought the more starter capable and starter experience like guys we could add to the group. We had an opportunity to create competition and raise our floor. I think we were fortunate last year. The 5 primary starters made every football game, and so our depth was not challenged. It'd be naive to think that we could be in that circumstance again, and so we just felt like it was appropriate to fortify depth, create competition, and you do that with capable people, specifically guys with starter-capable experience, and how we sort those guys out, man, remains to be seen. We'll get those guys in a competitive camp situation and come up with the best 5.
Yeah, put them in a
Makes sense.
competitive camp situation and come up with the best 5.
Yeah, and I kind of look at it as they got Cole, 4 guards, now 3 tackles. Maybe there's one to come, but it doesn't have to. I still would love to see a young, talented, moldable tackle added to the mix. But the chances are one of those names might not even make it to opening day. I mean, like,
Somebody
people
might get hurt,
in camp, let alone make it through 17 games and hopefully playoffs and preseason too. I mean, like, that's unrealistic.
And even if they look, so let's say you get through the end of August, and you've got 4 or 5 guards who have shown themselves to be interior guys who have shown themselves to be capable. You've got 3 offensive tackles, or 4. As you draft one, you got 4 offensive tackles who've shown themselves to be capable. Well, you're probably not going to deal a tackle,
Probably not.
but you could deal a guard
You could
to
deal
a team
guard,
that
right.
has an injury there.
Yeah, 100%. And Dotson's the obvious name because he's the incumbent and has
Under
a
own 1-year deal.
only 1 year
Yeah.
deal left. And I think there'd be plenty of teams that could use Dotson, especially if they suffer an injury. So,
Yeah, so
but you don't
it's-
have to.
No, you don't have to
right.
do anything. You can carry those guys. You'll carry 9.
Right, 100%. And then you keep Dotson, and he leaves a year from now. He helps your comp game, and there's benefits to all of it. So I think adding quality offensive linemen is never a bad idea.
Yeah, and as we've talked about in the past, Matt, if you have 5 average guys on your offensive line, you're probably an above-average offensive line.
Yeah, especially a month into the season, let alone 2, 3. When people start going down, especially if you're, as Max was saying, smart. More than just smart, though. As long as if you're not making mental errors, like, we're a good line, but
Don't beat yourself.
yeah, I missed this corner blitz, or I can't handle a twist, or there's a X stunt that we don't handle well, or those type of things. If your assignment's sound, and sure, you're going to get beat against Aaron Donald and Garrett and all these guys, you're going to lose reps. I mean, no one's saying you're going to win every one. But I believe more and more at that position, the secondary as well, but especially O-line, I can't have Waldo. You know
right.
what I mean? Give me
Well, and
5
that's what you do by adding
B-minuses.
depth at that position.
Right.
You lessen your chances of having Waldo
Yeah.
out there. You got guys. It's okay. This guy went down. We plugged this guy in. He's got 40 career starts under his belt.
And sometimes it's to no fault of their own. It's like, these guys are so tough and they're so physical, and boy, he's got an ankle that the general public has no clue he's playing.
Look at
through.
Cole last year. Cole,
Right.
There were about 8 different Mondays during the season last year where Mason Cole on Monday was in a walking boot and then
Right.
played the next week.
Yeah, and maybe he isn't. Well, none of them are 100%, but if he's at 60%, and everyone's like, "Boy, he's having a bad year," it's like, no, he's having a great year that he's even out
Oh,
there
yeah, I
because
can't
the
believe
guy
he's out
behind
there.
him would be half as good as him.
Well, and the beauty of having that depth now at that position,
and then he could heal.
right now you could tell Mason Cole, "Hey, Mason, sit this week out,
Right.
get your ankle healthy, and then we got guys who can replace you.
Mm-hmm.
We're perfectly fine there, but you're our guy."
And you'll come back as a starter
Yeah,
and
you'll
better
be-
than what you've been given.
We want you to be 100% 2 weeks from now, as opposed to going out
Yeah.
there and toughing it out.
Yeah.
We appreciate that.
Right.
We appreciate that you did it, but we don't need you to do it.
Like, this isn't what we're talking about, but along those lines, when they re-signed Ogunjobi without a lot of hesitation, it made me think he was fine last year, but we knew he was on the injury report every
Yeah.
year. They know deep down, boy, he was a shell of what he can be.
Well, we'll get to his clip here
Yeah.
in a second. Let's play back. Let's play another clip here from Mike Tomlin. Here's the second thing that Tomlin had to say.
But they're just veteran guys that are capable of playing. E-Rob I've been highly familiar with since he came out of Houston. We were down there at his pro day and just liked his play demeanor, and that has not changed over the 7 years that's been his career. So glad to add him into the fold. And Holcomb, man, is is an athletic guy. He can run. He can get to things. He's put together a nice body of work in Washington. Less familiar with him coming out, and really have gained perspective on him through his playing career in Washington.
Mike, is he a three-down? I'm sorry, is he a three-down guy?
I think we'll sort all of that out on the playing field, and I think that's where it should be. But we like the candidates. We like their skill set. We'll divide the labor up once we put the totality of our group together.
Yeah, that was talking about the inside linebacker position, and he was specifically asked, have you changed your mentality of what you're looking for at inside linebacker? Because there seems to be this idea out there that Holcomb and Landon Roberts are both downhill thumpers.
I think they're very different players.
I think they're very different players.
Right.
Yeah.
I like what Coach said about Roberts' play demeanor. And I do think there is still a place for a thumper, a set-the-tone guy, especially in this division. Well,
especially with the way teams ran the football last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is becoming – if you're going to play with lighter boxes, a guy like him has value. But I also think he's an ideal placeholder that if you draft a dude in the third round that's a hit, okay, Holcomb's my third guy. Or I'm sorry, Roberts is my third guy. Now I'm really sitting pretty, or Robinson goes past him. Great. But, you can line up and play with Roberts right now. Holcomb, I very much believe his best football is ahead of him. I think he was greatly ascending. If he'd have played 17 games last year, I bet you don't get him
for the price that you got. Yeah.
Right. And unsolicited, I've had like 3 different people from different media outlets, wherever, say, boy, I got buddies in Washington that are so unhappy that Holcomb left. I was like, wow. I didn't think that
2 years ago, he had 145 tackles. Now, I know tackles are not the be-all, end-all, but he also
he's a productive guy.
He took the ball away.
They were really lacking that last year. Splash plays, production. Right. So I think they upgraded at a minimal cost.
Yeah, really.
To be honest, I don't know off the top of my head, but how much cap space do they have at inside linebacker right now versus a a year ago? I bet it's less.
It has to be less because Miles Jack was making
right.
Devin Bush was
first round,
a former first round guy. So they've spent less money there, and again, I think even if Holcomb's not the best coverage guy in the league. Mm-hmm. They finished the year last year, basically the last month of the season, with Robert Spillane on the field
all the time.
100%,
right.
I know Cole Holcomb's a better coverage guy than Robert Spillane.
I know he covers more ground and he has more upside, and he's a better player today. I'm starting to feel this way at linebacker a little bit too. Just like the O-line conversation we had, just don't be Waldo again. I'd love to have Fred Warner, but there's fewer than them than ever in the league.
And they're going to cost you $20 million.
Right. I hope Tremaine Edmonds is a tremendous player for the Bears, but he's had one good year. He's peaking at the right time. If people are upset that the Steelers didn't give him $18 million, I'm like, oh, you might get him 2 years from now as a cap casualty.
Right. That's the other part of the equation. Right. Yeah, absolutely. One last clip I wanted to play here before we take a break. I asked him about how this has been different this year, working with Omar Khan throughout this situation, because last year it was still Kevin Colbert in that position. Right. So let's hear what Mike Tomlin had to say about that.
It's been fun, but not that it's the first time for us. Omar's been here longer than me, and although his role has changed, I just think how we communicate, the transparency, the fluidity of it, the spirit in which we work is the same. It's good to have him on pro days and things of that nature, but he traveled quite a bit with us a year ago on pro days, just in anticipation potentially of what transpired. And so it's been good, but you know how we measure these processes with how we perform, and we've been traveling and hitting pro days and combines all in the effort to put together a good draft class. And so it remains to be seen whether or not it's fruitful, but it's been a good process thus far.
Yeah, he, later in the conversation, he noted, and he did again this morning as well. Hey, I pick where I go on these pro days because people have been talking about this. Why did they go here? Why did they go there? Why didn't they go there? There are a lot of things that are involved with that. Some of it is logistics.
Yeah, like I can't go to Oregon State, then Miami the next day, maybe, or right?
Because you have your dinner with those guys the night before the workout, not the night after.
Right.
So if you're at Oregon State and you got to go to Miami, you're not getting there the night before at a reasonable hour.
Sure, to be able to really do your work.
So, for example, this year they did Iowa and Iowa State.
Yeah, of course. And you're going to hit Ohio State on your way home or whatever, too. There's some that are definitely going to hit. Ohio State's always one of them. So a couple notes just from what he said there. I didn't realize till just a second that Omar's been with the organization longer than
Oh,
Coach
yeah,
Tomlin.
since 2001.
I mean, I
yeah.
know he's been here a long time, but they both have. I just assumed Tomlin was first. I mean, I didn't know that off the top of my head. I'm sure it goes without saying that Kevin's missed. I mean, it has to be odd to
It's
have
different.
these meetings,
it's
and
different.
his presence just isn't there. You
Yeah.
know, but I do think it's interesting too that they're having all these guys attending pro days, maybe as much as any team in the league.
Yeah, but as he made mention this morning, don't read too much into where I go because sometimes I'm just throwing up a smoke screen. Now, last year there weren't too many smoke screens. Everybody in the league knew the Steelers were interested in a quarterback.
Right.
I wonder if this year they do a reverse on that and throw up some different smoke screens.
Probably. I mean, there's several schools they've been to that everyone just assumes they're there to see the first rounder.
Yeah.
You know, like
People were saying, "Oh, they're in Iowa. They're there to look at Van Ness."
they have
Well,
a tight end
Iowa's
that's
got-
really good.
Yeah, they
I
got
like
a tight
their
end is really
corner.
good. The defense was outstanding last year.
Yeah.
You can get into the 5th and 6th round and draft Iowa guys this year.
You could take
and be
Campbell
okay.
at 32.
Right,
You
yeah.
know, right. I mean, Moss could be a third-round pick for you at corner. I mean, Laporta could be your third-round pick. I mean, and maybe it is Van Ness. Maybe it's all the above. They're definitely paying attention to all the above while they're there.
Absolutely.
Like you mentioned before, I mean, they drafted Pouncey, but they noticed Joe Hayden when they were there.
Yeah, you look at the other dudes.
Right,
I mean, you're not just there scouting one guy.
Yeah.
Now, last year for the quarterback stuff, if you went to Liberty, you were there to see Malik Willis.
Of course.
You know, that's different.
Right. I mean, there are some tells, obviously. Teams that are going to Kentucky this year are watching Levis.
Yeah.
I mean, we know that. But if you're going to Ohio State, that doesn't mean you're only taking Stroud.
There were 20 guys at Ohio State
Right,
working
or
out.
Bama, I think a couple dudes too. Right.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you have this answer, but I always kind of find it funny. It's like, okay, we were in Michigan and we took Devin Bush out to dinner the night before. Does he have to go to dinner with the Commanders and Cowboys after
Well,
that?
I'm trying to remember.
I mean, they just fatten
was
him up so he
I
can't
was
run the next day.
watching the NFL Network, and they had one of the prospects on. I can't remember which one it was. It might have been. I
Sure,
can't remember.
somebody in
I can't
demand.
remember
Yeah,
who
right.
it was, but he was in demand. He had done two different dinners the night before,
Okay.
and they asked him. I said, "Did you eat 2 dinners?"
Yeah.
Where he says, "No, I did an appetizer at the first one, and then the second one I had an actual dinner."
Okay. I thought
So-
maybe you go meet for dessert.
Now,
after
if you're
or
an
whatever.
offensive lineman or a defensive lineman, you might eat 2 dinners.
Oh yeah, you might bring a cheesecake for after or whatever. Right.
I got a third meeting over here. I'm gonna have dessert.
But I bet it's hard for them. I mean, I doubt 32 teams are asking them out to dinner, but I bet it's more than one.
It's more than one, yeah.
Yeah.
And so the players have to pick and choose as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so if you're picking 31st, your Kansas City is a guy who's looked at as a top 10 pick. Is he going to go have dinner with the Chiefs? Probably not.
Probably not.
You say I respectfully decline.
Mhm.
I have something set up with the Jets.
Unless they tell his agent, "Hey, we really want to trade up for you."
Yeah.
Or, okay, well that's a little different. Or and you can't be like, "Well, I'm doing dinner with the Steelers and I'm doing dessert with the Bengals. Why don't we go get a bunch of drinks after?" No, right.
That's
So
not going to fly.
Right, and you got to work out the next day.
And not every team does the dinner thing.
No, right.
You know,
I think
so-
the Steelers are kind of known for it.
Yeah,
right.
absolutely. Tomlin enjoys it, and as he said, he likes to get to know the guy
Mm-hmm.
and what makes him tick. Not just he said, I'm watching the tape of these guys, so I always watch the tape first
Yeah, we were talking about that today.
because the tape is why you want to talk to the guy.
Right. To
You
get
know?
you in the door, right?
Yeah, if it's bad tape, you're probably not having dinner with him.
He was somebody else. Yeah. But there is stuff to glean from Senior Bowl.
How they
pro
interact.
days.
I know,
Right.
for example, when they met with Terrell Edmonds, Tremaine was also there,
Okay.
Virginia Tech that year.
Sure.
And everybody assumed, well, they're meeting with Tremaine. Well, yeah,
That was a linebacker
Terrell was
need,
there as well.
Right.
And so were the parents.
And so were the
So they brought the
and
parents along. So you get to know
the family.
how's he treat his mom, how's he
Mhm.
talk to his dad,
Oh,
things
yeah.
like that.
I mean, that was huge for us in recruiting too.
Yeah.
These 16-year-olds. Can these guys handle being away from mom and dad? How do they treat their parents? Do they seem entitled? Have they been given everything their whole life? That was important.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what's important right now? A break. We got to
Okay,
take another
there you
break. So he is Matt Williamson. I am Dale Lolley. You're listening to The Drive here on Steelers Nation Radio. And I just wanted to remind everybody that you can now listen to Steelers Nation Radio anytime, anywhere through your smart speaker. Just say, Alexa, play Steelers Nation Radio from iHeart, and Alexa will take care of the rest. We'll be back with more here live from the NFL meetings here in Phoenix, Arizona, right after this on Steelers Nation Radio.
Clear.
Welcome back. I am Dale Lolley. He is Matt Williamson. And Matt, I remembered, so we did this live on YouTube, or taped on YouTube, I guess, for the people at home.
Mm-hmm.
You can also watch the show later on today. It's going to be on the Steelers YouTube channel. And I noticed in the comments on that some of the people on YouTube, I guess there's a little different audience there than what usually listen to us. So let's explain a little bit about who we are, what we do here.
Yeah, I
on
guess it
Steelers
is new
Nation
for people.
Radio.
We take that for
different
take it
crowd.
for granted sometimes, right?
Different crowd as we watch
This is what we do.
the peanut gallery over there dancing over this. But go ahead.
Lead it
Matt.
off. Lead it
No,
off.
you go ahead.
So I've been doing this 25 years or so. Donated to go real quick thumbnail. I donated a year with Duquesne, just doing anything I could. Didn't make a cent. They gave me like a pair of pants and 2 sweatshirts or something like that. And I'd film.
So it's kind of like doing this job.
Pretty much. But like the linebacker coach wouldn't show up. Like, Matt, do something with the linebackers. Organize that recruiting film. And then I got an opportunity to go over to Pitt and do it for money. Very, very little. $12,000 a year. And I stayed there for 3 years, learned a ton as the recruiting assistant. I was there for Antonio Bryant's last year, both of Larry's years. We pumped a lot of guys into the pros. And then our receivers coach, we had great receivers, mentioning those two. J.D. Brookhart went to become the head coach at Akron, took me along with him as his director of football operations, which I didn't get to do enough football stuff there, but I still learned a lot. I organized the road trip to Penn State that year and things like that, a lot of recruiting stuff. First time I'd really been away from Pittsburgh, honestly, as an adult. And just so happened, one of the things we wanted to do at Akron was let's get a relationship with the Browns. They're right down the street. We could help each other out quite a bit. And they said, hey, we're looking for young scouts. Do you know anybody? I'm like, I got someone in mind. Interviewed against a bunch of people, won the job. And that was Ben's rookie year. I did 1 year with the Browns. We lost a whole lot of games, as was the norm back then. Steelers were 15-1. We all got fired. And one of the guys I worked with the Browns had a big-time connection with ESPN. And along with Todd McShay and others, the Scouts Inc. group got hired by ESPN. Todd's still there, and most of us are gone. I did 10 years with ESPN. And then since then, that was probably a dozen years or so ago, I've worked for a lot of different media outlets, tons of podcasting, and you and I have been doing the drive 7 years? I'm just guessing, spitballing off the top of my head.
I don't know. You didn't give me an anniversary present this year, so I don't know how long it was.
Right. But we've been doing this heavy, and I've been working more and more with the Steelers, which has been great.
And as it turns out, we're both Pitt Johnstown grads, and we didn't know that when we were thrown together. We had no idea of.
We almost overlapped there, but didn't.
Yeah,
right.
So that's just how it worked out.
And we didn't know each other hardly at all when they said you two are going to do a show together.
I'd done a couple radio hits with you, but they were
like 15 minutes or whatever.
We hadn't sat down together.
No, right.
They were
right.
over the phone or whatever.
Yeah, sure.
So it was, just kind of boom, and it meshed. I did a little more traditional route to this through the media. I've covered the Steelers since 1993 for various outlets, and now for Steelers.com. So I've been to basically every Steelers game since 1993.
You mentioned last night how many stadiums you've seen the Steelers play in, and I was going to guess like 50. I wasn't even close.
The last time I counted it, and this was probably about 5 years ago, I actually sat down one day and counted all the stadiums that I have seen the Steelers play in, and I think I was at like 72 at that point.
And there's some odd ones.
It's up over 80 now. I'm including preseason games and things of that nature because I've seen preseason
foreign
games in
overseas,
different countries
right.
and different sides of the planet and all kinds of stuff. So
I remember you even said like Tennessee was building a stadium, before when they became the Titans, and that was where you're at.
Covered the Oilers/Titans in Houston at the Astrodome.
We just got a text from our lovely Brian LaMartina. This will be our 7th year together.
7th year. So Brian would know because Brian's been a part of that as well.
Right.
He's all over
instrumental,
that.
Right.
But I've seen that the Oilers/Titans play the Steelers at the Astrodome, which is no longer there.
Yeah.
Or actually, it's still there, but
they might be there.
They don't use it there.
They don't play football there.
The amazing thing about the Astrodome, by the way, is it used to be, it was like the 8th wonder of the world.
Now it looks like
it sits next to the new stadium in Houston. And the new stadium dwarfs it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just. But when you used to pull up to the Astrodome, you're like, "Wow, look at that!"
Yeah.
And now it's
they have AstroTurf.
That's nothing.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right.
So they They went to Memphis when they first went to
That's what I
to,
was
to
thinking.
Tennessee.
Okay, there was a
yeah,
year in between
at the
there.
Liberty
Strange,
Bowl.
that's
So I
right.
saw them play the Steelers at the Liberty Bowl. Then when they moved over to Nashville the next year, they played at Vanderbilt's stadium.
Right. Okay.
And then they moved into the new stadium.
So
I've seen them
Titans are helping your cause.
four
Right.
different places for one team.
Yeah.
You know,
And I even mentioned last night, and I was wrong. I'm like, and that's without the division making that many changes.
they made a
Like,
bunch
I guess
back
the
in the
Browns
day.
have made a couple.
The Browns have had the Bengals have had two different stadiums.
Two, yeah.
I've seen the Ravens in two different stadiums, and not counting them as the Browns. The Browns have been in two different. So there's been some turnover there. You know, Jacksonville really at that time, which was in the AFC, what was then the AFC Central.
Mm-hmm.
They're the only ones that haven't a stadium change
Wow, that's surprising.
during that time period, because they play at the Gator. It was the Gator Bowl, and now it's they've whatever they're calling it these days, but it's the same stadium. They just keep upgrading it and building onto it. But there's so many. If you think about the late '90s was the big stadium building craze in the NFL.
Three Rivers turns to Hines.
Yeah.
You know, like
Everybody
these
was doing
baseball,
that, yeah.
Football stadiums, they start to build their own.
Yeah.
And, yeah, make them a little more personalized and all that. So that makes sense. The cookie cutters are starting to
They're
leave.
pretty much all gone now.
And I guess as any Steeler fan knows, which is remarkable, you've only seen two coaches.
I've seen two coaches.
Right. You were hired Cowher's second year?
Yes.
Okay. So
I actually covered a few games his first year.
Okay.
I was that was back when I was working in Oil City back in the day. My first full-time job in the business, and I talked my sports editor into going down to cover Ted Marchibroda. He was the coach of the Colts at that time. The Colts were still in Indianapolis,
right?
Or we're still in Baltimore, I should say.
Oh wow. Okay.
Or maybe they were in India. I can't remember.
I bet
It's
they
all
were.
a blur at this point. But Ted's from Franklin, just outside of Franklin, Rocky Grove. And I said, have we ever gone and covered any
Head
of his
coach in
games?
the NFL, right?
Yeah, we don't have a lot. Venango County doesn't have any of these. And so I
kinda
went
unique,
down
yeah.
and I said, I had an apartment in Pittsburgh still. I had just graduated from Pitt, I finished up my classes at the Pitt.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I'm going to be down there. How about I just go cover the game? And so I
I'm
did.
in the building.
Yeah.
Right.
And I met my future boss at that game, and I got hired in
Covering the team pretty much
Washington.
ever since.
Ever since I've been covering the team. So, yeah, it's just a lot of history
Yeah.
involved, a lot of playoff games. I figured it out the one day. I think I tweeted this out a couple years ago. I think I covered more playoff games than if you covered the Browns.
Oh, I bet.
Like everybody in their organization, everybody who's ever covered the Browns.
And back to my background a little bit too. Like as a child, I would write letters to Chuck Noll of how he should trade for Marcus Allen, and I remember
Not the Marcus Allen that the
the Raiders running back. Like they just got Bo Jackson. If you send in their second and third and Walter Abercrombie, you could get Marcus Allen, and I'd get a signed picture back from Coach Noll or whatever. And I remember you mentioned UPJ. You used to write. Here's your essay to get into college. And I remember, if you could have dinner with any two people in history, who would it be? And I wrote Vito Corleone and Tony Dungy. Or whoever the defensive coordinator was at the time. So I grew up, just glued to Mel Kiper's Blue Books, and there was no internet back then. And
Yeah.
I remember I put this document together that was like this thick of every draft profile I could find on this new thing called the internet. And I sent it to the Steelers, and they wrote me back you did a lot of work on this, son. You're you should maybe look into this as a career. So I was passionate about it forever.
Yeah, here you are. But anyways, that's who we are. Hopefully everybody enjoys
We need
the
to remind
show.
people once in a while.
Every once in a while, just throw that out there. And I figure we have a new audience on YouTube here, so that should do some splaining there on why Matt was talking about working for the Browns and his previous life. It's all of 1 year.
And my wife was the only one that would wear Browns gear that I knew, and I would send Christmas cards to my buddies, and they tore them up. And
You actually had a funny story about that. So, as it were, the Browns played the Steelers in
twice,
the playoffs.
of course, right?
In the playoffs.
Before I was there,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
And so you're out at a dinner, right?
Well, it was a bunch of us scouts were, it was a low time of the season, and we're at a local watering hole having a few, and, I'm new and getting to know each other, and everybody's talking about the game. And I'm like, yeah, I was in the 10th row with my terrible towel, and we've been tailgating all day, and we were going crazy, and the Steelers won, and they all kind of looked at me like, that's swell, youngster, but we all didn't get playoff checks that day because of it. And we're like, oh, yeah, several $1,000s or whatever for that hurt their families. I'm like,
Sorry about that.
that was my memory of the game, and it's much different than yours. Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry, Kelly Holcomb.
Right. I was pretty psyched about it. You know?
But anyways, we're going to take another break here. We got a guest coming up here, Jerry Dulac from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette is going to join us here.
Last thing too.
Oh,
That
yeah.
year I did spend with the Browns. I mean, we obviously weren't competitive with the Steelers. I just waited. I mean, when everyone left the building, I just watched Ben tape. You know, like I think the Steelers might got something here. This rookie looks all right.
We might have blown that one.
We'd go down and get soft serve ice cream in the basement and watch Ben. You know.
But anyways, he is Matt Williamson. I am Dale Lolley. We'll be joined by Jerry Dulac here in the next segment. Here as we finish off hour number 2.
Yeah, rolling along.
Live at the NFL meetings here at the Arizona Biltmore here in Phoenix. We'll be back with more right after this.
You're listening.
Welcome back. I am Dale Lolley. He is Matt Williamson, and this is The Drive on Steelers Nation Radio. We are live from the NFL owner meetings here at the Arizona Biltmore in Phoenix, and we're pleased to be joined now by a guy who's done this quite a bit and been on this side of the mic quite a bit as well. Jerry Dulek of the Post-Gazette and the Pittsburgh Steelers Radio Network. How you doing, Jerry?
Dale, good. Many times out here at Biltmore. It's 3 or 4 for me for the owners' meetings. And first time, you guys are doing radio.
First
here.
time radio.
We've been doing it to Combine for a number of years. In fact, I go back to when we started broadcasting at the Combine. I think we were one of, in the hallway, we were one of 5 or 6 stations. Now, of course, every team has at least one representative.
And if you look down through here, I mean, I can remember the last time we were here at the Biltmore, there were maybe 3 team tables set up.
This is still sparse.
Yeah,
relatively speaking.
Compared to the Combine, yes,
Growing,
but
though,
it's certainly trending in the direction where everybody's going to have some kind of radio outlet here, because that's where the league's going. And
More importantly, how's the golf in this neck of the woods?
Well, it's funny. I discovered when I got here that there are some golf courses here.
bet.
I did not
Interestingly
know
enough.
that. The other thing I discovered is that the sky is blue. There are very few clouds, and the ball flies farther here.
Okay.
It's funny. I never knew that because I've never, ever played golf here, and I just stumbled across it by accident.
Well, Jerry, we've had the opportunity here now to hear from Mike Tomlin twice in the last 24 hours. What have you gleaned from what Mike Tomlin has had to say?
Well, Dale, Mike, he is the master at saying a lot and sometimes not saying much. But he was today, for example, at the coaches' breakfast, if you will, the AFC coaches. He was enlightening to a degree about the safety position, the free safety position, strong safety position. Now that, that Terrell Edmonds was not going to be pursued and signed with the Eagles. And I thought it was intriguing that he talked about the possibility, and he said he's already discussed it with Patrick Peterson about moving him around and indicating that safety could be maybe not a full-time option, but as a possibility in some of their defenses. And I thought, when you look at guys who, get older, cornerbacks who get older, one of the logical moves is to move them to safety. And Patrick Peterson's a guy who gets his hands on the ball and catches it. 5 picks last year, second in the league. Minka was tied for first with 6. So, when you have a guy like Minka back there, which he said it's reasonable to expect they'll move him around even more too. You have DeMonte Casey. We saw him play, started strong safety last year when Terrell Edmonds could not play against the Raiders. Is that a full-time option for them? I don't know about that, but hey, there's still free agency left, as we know, and there's still the draft. I don't know that the draft is going to be the immediate answer, certainly not at safety, probably a corner, but I thought that was probably the most intriguing thing in terms of what you can expect for 2023 that he said this morning.
Yeah, I got the impression that they're not done at safety. I mean, there's going to be at least a prominent member added. Do you still have the same impression on the offensive line?
Matt, first about the safety. It's funny. It's this time exactly a year ago that Kevin Colbert said we have starter-capable players at 24 to 25 positions, and the one that they didn't was strong safety, and then 3 days before the draft, they signed Terrell Edmonds. So obviously the same scenario could exist. I wouldn't be surprised to see them add one, but I'm not sure. But the offensive line, I think the way it's going to play out, Isaac Seumalo was brought in. He's going to be a starter. They paid him starting money, and you can pencil him in at left guard. Now we'll see. Do they want to move Mason Colt? No. Do they want to move James Daniel? No. Do they want to move Chick Okorafor? No. We'll see what happens in the draft. Maybe at left tackle. Maybe. But I'm not. I have not of the belief that they are ready to give up on Dan Moore. And Nate Herbig was brought in to be a backup. He was paid backup money, 2 years, $8 million. And so now the question is, what does that do for Kevin Dotson? Goes into the final year of his contract, counts, $2.5 million against the cap? And most especially, what does it do with Kendrick Green, who was inactive for all 17 games? Why do you even keep him around when Nate Herbig is going to take up one roster spot? So I think that's going to be the kind of the repercussions of those moves. But I don't think Nate Herbig was brought in with the idea of being a starter. Is he starter capable? Yeah, because he started, 28 of 44 games in his career, all 11 last year. with the Jets. But, he's a big body guy. Of course, Kevin Dotson's a big body guy. But I think they like Nate Herbig, but I think they really like him as a quality backup.
Makes
Yeah, it
sense.
just so happened he got signed first.
Right.
You know, that's just the way it
And
worked
the other
out.
thing, too, Dale, there was when he was signed or when the report was that he agreed to a deal, the guy who put it out suggested that, they really like him and could be a starter for them. And that gave everybody the idea that,
Everybody,
are they
yeah.
bringing in 2 starters? And that is just not the case. He was not brought in and being viewed as a starter, being viewed as a quality depth guy.
Yeah, that's the thing that, everybody, how's this all going to work? Are they going to bench James Daniels? No.
No, that's
No,
not
right.
right.
He was the
That's
best
not
guy
gonna
last year,
happen.
right?
I
I can't see moving him either, like you said.
I find it curious too, Dale, when you ask me about the things that Mike Tomlin has said. When yesterday he told us, he says, you can't be naive to think that they're going to go through another season of starting the same
Absolutely.
offensive line
Sure.
for 17 games. And really, when you think of it, 3 of those guys played every snap. Chuks Okorafor missed 1 snap, and Mason Cole missed 46 snaps all year. Otherwise, they started, 1,160 snaps.
Not going to happen again.
No,
No.
and so that was part of the reason, too, for the moves on the offensive line with Nate Herbig. You just can't think that that's going to happen again. I'm just curious how rare that probably is in the National
it doesn't
Football League.
happen
I
often,
don't
yeah.
know, but
Right.
you can't, to play that many snaps. I think whatever the percentage is, 99 point something percent that 5 guys played all the snaps. That's pretty impressive.
We've done this long enough, Jared, that, we've seen other years where the Steelers, they have that 12 different starting combinations.
Right.
Who's going to who's playing right tackle this week? You.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely something that's outside the norm here. So as we sit here basically a month out from the draft, you getting any feeling one way or the other?
Yeah, no, Dale. I mean, the feeling I have is they want to go defense, and it's what I think they should do. Unless there's I don't think there's a plug and play left tackle in the draft.
Yeah.
So, but there are corners who are that, and I think there's no question they have to find another Cam Hayward for the future. You lose Stephon Tuitt. Cam's going to be 34. It's time to go find that guy. You could say the same thing about the offensive line. It's time to go find a Marquise Pouncey. It's time to go find a David DeCastro. But that line of scrimmage, defensive line of scrimmage, makes your inside linebackers better. But it's the same thing at corner. So if I'm a betting man, which I'm not, I'd say you're going to take a corner or they're going to take a defensive lineman. But I would say, again, depends who's there. All things being equal, in their best case scenario, I would think it's going to be a cornerback.
So, Jerry, do you agree? I mean, they have 4 picks in the first 2 days. I would say there's a 50% chance one of those is an offensive tackle, and maybe an 85% chance one of them's a corner.
I would definitely put the cornerback at least at 85, but I would agree with you about the left tackle.
Okay.
I mean, obviously you don't need a guard. Several of those guys are center capable. I like the center from Minnesota. Mm-hmm. I could see him being at 49. Is he there? I don't think so. 32, he's probably there. I wouldn't balk at that one at all. But I think if with those 4 picks, if it were me, I would say 3 of the 4 should be defense.
I would think so.
But the other caveat there is they never turn their back on a skill player. So if there's a wide receiver on that board that they go, we got a high grade on this guy.
Your second-year quarterback might be appreciative.
Somewhere, I wouldn't fall over if 49 was a wide receiver. I don't expect that, but I certainly wouldn't fall over.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I did ask Mike Tomlin as well about Larry Ogunjobi's re-signing yesterday,
which was key for them.
And he said, I said, hey, did we see the best of him last year? Because if you remember, he's coming off the foot injury. He's dealt with that toe issue for a large portion of the last year. He said, no, he spent the entire offseason basically rehabbing to get that foot in condition. If you remember, he signed right before training camp started. Right. So, I think that they're banking on him being a lot better this year than he was last year.
Yeah, and didn't practice a lot as the season went on. Dale missed a couple. I think he only missed one.
He only missed one game. Yeah.
Yeah. But they had to be real careful with him. And it's good. It's not to get away from Larry Ogunjobi, but Cole Holcomb is going to face
A similar thing.
Similar
Yeah.
problem because he's coming off a Liz Frank injury. He's not able to run right now. We'll see where he is at training camp. Should be okay, but it's going to be the same process. I think they're going to have to evaluate how much they use him during the OTAs. I don't expect that to happen at all, but they'll monitor that situation. But yeah, I think signing Larry Ogunjobi, they wanted to sign Cam Sutton and they wanted to sign Larry Ogunjobi, but Sutton's deal with Detroit. God bless him that he could get $11 million annually. There's no way the Steelers were going to go pay him that kind of money, and it wasn't even close. But Larry Ogunjobi, I think, was a key signing. I don't think there's any question they wanted to have him back.
So they obviously totally reshuffled the inside linebacker group. I mean, 3 guys are gone, 2 are in. Mark Robinson's still in the mix. They're probably not done, though, right? You think there's a draft pick in the mix there?
Yeah, I think so. I think, when we talk about 3 of the first 4, when I talk about 3 of the first 4 being defense, I could see that happening. I think, they look at Cole Holcomb potentially as a 3-down player. I think Landon Roberts, what was Mike Tomlin's nickname for him? What did he call him?
E-Rob.
Yeah, E-Rob, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Who he said he has great familiarity with going back to when he came out of the draft in 2016. And I'm not going to call him a 1-year rental, but he's a short-term player for
Kind of a
them.
placeholder.
Yeah. So, I could see that happening. And I think a lot of it, though, too, I think very, very curious to see where Mark Robinson is in his development. In terms of playing downhill, boy, he shows.
He can
shows
do that.
up,
Now,
yeah.
he can go forward. Can he
do
go
that.
backwards?
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
he shows up.
Yeah. He was very impressive in the short time he played, but has to know what he's doing out there. There was a little bit of Kendrell Bell game planning there. Go get the ball.
Yeah, right,
And he
right.
did.
Yeah.
And he did. But eventually, you got to do more than that.
They just didn't have splash plays from that position last year, and
No.
he's certainly a splash player.
Yes.
He shows up. Yeah.
I agree with you.
Very much. I think you sign a Landon Roberts to work with him specifically, a veteran guy who's that kind of player, a downhill player.
Right, exactly. Yeah, they are. I was going to say that they have similar types of players, and you're right. He can learn from him. But to remake, we've seen him year after year. John Bostic, Mark Barron, Miles Jack, Joe Schobert,
Bush.
trying to find that guy. Yeah, and they just those guys have
been
all
searching.
lasted 1 year.
Right.
One year, and then they're gone. I think Cole Holcomb has a chance to last more than a year.
I do as well. I mean, he's a younger player than some of those other guys that they've
Right.
signed. He's an ascending player, I think, in terms of where he was drafted and how he kind of developed in Washington. So it's going to be interesting to see again where he's at with that foot injury. He talked about it when we spoke to him last week. He's going to do whatever they want him to do. I wouldn't expect him to do a lot, maybe in the off season stuff, but then when training camp rolls around, perhaps he'll be ready to go. Our guest has been Jerry Dulac of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette and the Steelers Radio Network. We're going to take a break here. We are live at the NFL meetings here at the Arizona Biltmore in Phoenix. He's Matt Williamson. I am Dale Lolley, and you're listening to The Drive on Steelers Nation Radio. Welcome back. I am Dale Lolley. He is Matt Williamson. This is The Drive on Steelers Nation Radio. We are live at the Arizona Biltmore here in Phoenix for the owners' meetings. And, of course, we will be here through Wednesday. And then we'll still do our Friday show this week. So I get a little bonus drive this week on Tuesday.
Yeah,
usually during the offseason we do Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So we'll be getting
these are
the
extended
Tuesday show.
shows too, so you're getting all kinds of us.
3 hours, a 3-hour drive.
Mhm,
So
right.
if you're taking a 3-hour drive, you're
Yeah.
going somewhere.
But that's been fun though. We got some good guests,
absolutely.
and right,
Absolutely.
hopefully get some more tomorrow, and right.
Yeah, we should have some more guests lined up here for tomorrow's show. And as we have mentioned previously, these shows are available on YouTube as well, on the Steelers YouTube channel. You can go check those out on there. Lots of great content beyond this. Just this show on their interviews.
Oh
and
yeah.
all the special stuff that the Steelers do available on there. And so if you're not,
Check it out.
you don't subscribe to that and you're a Steelers fan, what are you
Shame
doing?
on you.
Yeah, what are you
Get
doing? It's
after
all
that,
there,
right.
free and available for you.
Mhm, absolutely.
Matt, as you mentioned previously, Mike Tomlin spoke to the media yesterday and again today. And so I wanted to continue playing back some of the stuff that Mike had to
it's been
say. Some of this we've already talked about a little bit, but he was asked yesterday why they targeted Patrick Peterson
Okay.
as in free agency after they lost Cam Sutton. And here's what he had to say about that.
The intangible quality, his football character, his love and passion for the game. I think that is just something to be learned from. We had the benefits of a guy like Joe Hayden with a similar resume and love and passion for the game. So Pat P obviously is a guy that brings something beyond his resume and playmaking capabilities, which is an asset to football teams. When guys can be living examples of what to do, how to go about this professional football business, I just think we all benefit from that, and he is that. I think that's something that I've known about him even prior to him being in the National Football League, that guy is a football lover and an appreciator of this game, and I think his actions reflect that, and I think that's some of the things that made him very attractive.
Did you meet Patrick through BMAC before he went to LSU? He kind of insinuated that.
Years ago, man. He was a teenager.
Yeah, their relationship goes way back.
Maybe you could explain that to people. What's the BMAC thing all about?
Brian McFadden is former Steelers cornerback, and he is cousins with Patrick Peterson. And they're when I say they're cousins, they are close.
Okay.
They're not that far off in age from each other.
Mhm.
Obviously, Brian McFadden's his older cousin.
Right. Look up that type of thing.
He's a guy that he's going to wear Brian McFadden's number with
That's
the
pretty
Steelers,
cool,
his former
yeah.
number. So, yeah, I think there was, probably met him through Brian McFadden when he was in high school. Hey, here's my cousin. He's a highly rated cornerback coming out of high school.
I was about to say, when Coach is like, I was aware of him as a teenager. I'm like, I bet Patrick Peterson was a pretty good player in high school.
I'm guessing
maybe highly
so.
recruited before being the third pick overall.
And that would pick Mike Tomlin's interest.
Yeah, right.
Like,
Go watch a young kid, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. You could tell that Coach is a lover of the game, and Peterson's a lover of the game, and I think that's important not only for the locker room, and I'm not saying he's going to be the next Cam Hayward and run the locker room, but he brings immediate respect. People are, everyone knows who he is.
We talked about, you mentioned him in the same breath as Joe Hayden, and when Joe Hayden was signed by the Steelers, he immediately came in and was respected.
Sure.
He had the gravitas there. These guys knew who he was. Oh, he's a former Pro Bowl player.
Yeah.
Well, Patrick Peterson's an 8-time Pro Bowl player.
Right.
And multiple first team All Pros. You're going to
best
have
in the business for a long time. Yeah.
Guys are going to know that, and they're going to gravitate to that. And he's got that kind of personality.
I know people don't like to think about this, but when Rod Woodson went to the Ravens, it was like, oh, we just got Rod Woodson. Right. And even though Ed Reed was there and Lewis and those dudes. Doesn't matter. It's not like they're competing for who's the alpha dog here. If they're all football lovers, like Tomlin said, I think that goes a long way. And the other thing is, people don't like to think about this, but a lot of dudes in any league, I assume, but I know the NFL, they stick around a year or two too long and pick up a paycheck, go through the motions, and like, if you have extreme pride and love for the game, you're not going to be one of those guys.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You just respect it too much.
I can remember asking Joe Hayden, this was 3 years ago, And I'm just having a conversation with Joe, and I said, I brought up Woodson, both Woodsons.
Yeah,
the
right.
Woodses. I
Charles
said,
Woodson, a great.
you're a guy, you're getting, on the wrong side of 30 here. You play a position that obviously requires extreme physical attributes.
Right, right.
Do you ever see yourself moving to safety to prolong your career a little bit? And he said, no,
That's not for him. Yeah.
That's not for me. And he wasn't as big. He's not as big as Patrick
No,
Peterson.
he
is.
wasn't. 218 at his
Yeah,
front
he's a
line, and right.
190-pound cornerback, and
They're different styles.
yeah. And so Peterson, I think, could do that, and has that in his background. And so Jerry Dulek, who we just had on, followed up the question about Patrick Peterson with this question, and he said, does Peterson trust Mike Tomlin to use him correctly? And here's what Mike Tomlin had to say.
Mike, it sounds like it's a little bit of the red paint them hard red, but he said one of the things about coming here that he liked is he said he knew you would take care of him in terms of, at age 33, how to use them. Is that all part of it, though, too, figuring out what they can do and their skill set?
It certainly is. Not only in terms of what they do, but just how much of it they do. Situationally, in game, or even from a big picture perspective. I think when you got guys in their early to mid 30s, you better manage all of that. You better be intentional about it, how much they practice, when they practice, etc. That's something that's not foreign to me, and that's something that I'm okay with managing. We've had some quality players into that age range, and we do now, and so that's my job to kind of manage that in an effort to get the best out of them and keep them upright. And I don't run away from that. I run to that.
Yeah, he's done a great job of taking those guys, and you call it the Veterans Day off, and I write that all the time, and throughout the course of whatever, and people, what do you mean a Veterans Day off? They're not there.
Off, right.
No, they're in the building. They're there going through the everything that everybody else is going through.
Right. They
They're
didn't
just
sleep
not
in that day
yeah.
and not come to
They just
work.
didn't come to not come to work. They're there, but
They're not banging their bodies.
Yeah,
around,
you're not
right.
out there running around on the field, and
Right.
so you're saving your knees, your ankles a little bit more because you want these guys to be at their best on game days, and they don't need when you're a guy that's been in the league 10 years. You don't need to practice like somebody who's in their second year.
No, right. I mean, you're not working on your pedal or
Yeah.
you're flipping your hips or whatever. So I think that's a two-way street that great players, veteran players deserve. That this is hard on our bodies. Don't treat me like the second-year guy that you're trying to coach up, that you don't trust yet, and you're trying to learn each other. And we talk about this a lot. Like rookie head coaches don't have any of that track record. Even second, third-year head coaches, but Pete Carroll and Peyton and Harbaugh and Tomlin have so many veterans that can vouch for them and be like, he treated me perfectly. He didn't ask me to do too much. I mean, he didn't bang me around in camp. He saved me for week one. I'm not out there in the fourth quarter of preseason games, tackling running backs that are trying to make their bones in this league, or running down on kickoffs when I don't need to, and things of that nature. And like you said, give me a Wednesday off 10 times during the season or whatever.
Maybe not every Wednesday, but
right. On a short week, I mean, don't kill me. Things like that.
So the other beautiful part about that with a guy like Peterson, and it's no secret, I think, that the Steelers are going to draft a cornerback.
No doubt.
At some point in this draft. Well, if you've got a guy like Patrick Peterson and he's not practicing fully on Wednesdays, but your rookie isn't a starter,
he gets more snaps.
He gets more snaps.
Yeah,
he's out there, 100% of the time on every Wednesday. It's what they did with Ben, with the young quarterback. So, every Wednesday was an extra day of practice for Mason Rudolph or whoever that backup was on that given team.
And I also think back to what I was just saying about saving their bodies and not asking too much of them. You also don't want to embarrass the guy either. It's not like, hey, you got Jamar Chase one-on-one with no help for 65 snaps. I'm not that guy anymore.
Yeah,
don't put me in that position and embarrass me and tarnish my legacy.
Yeah, and that's when he said things like that. That's why I asked him today about is Patrick Peterson in the mix at that safety spot, and I think obviously he is because he's got that body type, and he's got the skill set to do it. I think he showed that last year. When you get your hands on 15 passes, I don't care how you're doing it,
right?
Whether you're playing manual or whether you're playing zone. And Peterson talked about it. He's like, look, I was able last year with the Vikings to have my eyes on the quarterback.
Yeah, I think that's who he's become at this point.
Right, and there's a lot of value. I mean, again, if you take the ball away 5 times next year, I don't care what else he does. If he has 5 interceptions for the Steelers next year, that's a great signing.
Great signing. I mean, maybe he doesn't flip his hips and turn and run and press man coverage as well as he used to. I'm sure he doesn't. But I bet he reads quarterbacks and route combinations better than ever. Which is
he sees it before the quarterback does.
Right. Which is an eyes on the backfield as opposed to the opponent's belt buckle. I mean,
that's the beauty of putting Rob Woodson or Charles Woodson at safety at that point in their careers is they're seeing the field like a quarterback.
Right.
Because they've done it for so long.
1,000 times.
Yeah.
And if this vacates, I know someone's going to come into my zone, and that type of thing. You understand route combinations. You've played against that quarterback 10 times in your career, or something like that.
Or that coach,
the coach,
that coordinator,
right? That play caller.
Like you have something to fall back on. I've played this coordinator. Yeah, Ben used to talk about it with defensive coordinators.
Oh, I bet. Right.
I know what
blitz is coming.
This guy does. I know what his defense is about.
He's gonna heat me up. Right. Yeah. And we talked a lot about Cam Sutton, obviously, before he left for Detroit. Good for him. He signed a nice contract, and Jerry mentioned that. And Sutton did play some in the deep. I mean,
he was
on
deep,
the third level from time to time.
Absolutely.
And I think Peterson will as well. And I'm really warming up to the idea that I didn't initially think when they signed him is he will be closer to the line of scrimmage and maybe some linebacker-ish stuff for big nickel and all those type of things too. So your slot corner / third safety might be the Hall of Fame corner.
Yeah.
And
let's not mince words here. He is a Hall of Fame cornerback.
He's a first ballot Hall of Fame cornerback.
Yeah.
I mean, he's an easy one in my opinion. Right.
Yeah, when you have that kind of resume, again, I've sat in that Hall of Fame room and done the voting, and that stuff gets brought up. But not so much the Pro Bowls, because those are more popularity contests. But if you're multiple first team all pros, you're going to get a lot of consideration for the Hall of Fame.
I mean, there's probably 5 years of his career that he was a top 2 corner. And many of them he was number 1.
Was he on the all-decade team for the
that I don't know, but I'd be shocked if he wasn't.
I'm going to look that up here.
One of the problems with the all-decade team is if you got drafted in 2014, 15, 16, you only do 5 years in each decade or whatever. It makes it harder. But I mean, I don't know.
I actually voted on that one because that was the year. So we did that in 2020. So I did the vote in 2020.
So this is the 10s. I mean the 2010s.
This will be the 2010s here. He is. Yeah, he was on the all-decade team. So
okay, right.
If
There's a long way.
You make the all-decade team, you're probably going to the Hall of Fame because the Hall of Fame voters are the guys who vote on the all-decade team.
Makes sense. So what? He was one of 2 corners that were considered the best at his position.
I think we picked
decade.
we picked 3 corners. So
okay.
it was Patrick Peterson, Darrell Revis, and Richard Sherman.
Revis is in, and he was a first ballot
That's
guy.
a pretty good group. And then you had just 2 guys who were listed as DBs. You had Chris Harris and Tyrann Mathieu.
Okay, that makes sense. And this is what we're talking about, but I think Peterson has a better chance than Sherman, and Revis is already in.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think Peterson's better player than Sherman.
Me too.
Different player. Yeah.
More talented.
But Peterson's right there when you're talking about lockdown cornerbacks in their heyday. That's what they did.
That's what they did, right.
The
other thing about him, and I'm sure this ship has sailed, but we haven't brought it up, he was an elite returner. I mean, he was like AB. Like, we only put him out in certain
Not just
situations.
a returner, but as a kick blocker as well.
Yep,
coming off the edge and doing things like that. He even did that last year in Minnesota, I believe.
Yeah. We referenced my time with the Browns. Well, that whole staff was dudes from the U, and they were like, Ed Reed was the best kick blocker I've ever seen in my life. Some of those elite guys just excel in things you don't think about that they do, and Peterson was like that. Like, when they needed a big punt return with the Cardinals, he was back there, but not first one of the game against Seattle when you're 2-10 or whatever. Right? So he has quite the track record.
Yeah. So when you can add a guy like that to your defense, and I don't care what point in his career he's at, this is kind of what we talked about with Bobby Wagner. Kick the tires on it and see what's right. And in this situation, it just worked out that.
I bet Wagner pays dividends for the Seahawks.
Oh,
He's already
not that he's been gone that long.
But he's still playing well and highly respected and first ballot Hall of Famer. And, he's not hanging on for dear life like some of these athletes are. I mean, he's still excelling.
Yeah, so, they'll be able to do some different things with a guy like Patrick Peterson. Just call him a defensive back.
Mm-hmm.
Because people seem to forget, last year at this time, everybody was high on Akello Weatherspoon. Now all of a sudden they're down on him. Well, he had a rough year last year. Was banged up a lot. Didn't play.
A lot of that was outside his control too.
Yeah, didn't play as much. And let's be honest, Levi Wallace was playing well. They couldn't. And you know what? Cam Sutton had a good year. So even when Weatherspoon got healthy,
I don't think he's
they
a
weren't
killer
going
on special teams.
Yeah, they weren't.
either.
They
Right.
weren't going to. They weren't going to make that change. But so you still have
He's
two
still
guys
in the mix, right?
that you can play on the outside. You still, they re-signed James Pierre.
Oh, I think Pierre has a lot of value.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. The cupboard is not as bare as some seem to think.
No, I agree. And Millette, I think, is a quality player as well. There's more options now at slot, more coming in the draft in terms of his position overall. But I can play with Pierre. I know I can play with Levi. I have mixed feelings about Witherspoon, but it's just more because I haven't seen him as much
Yeah,
lately.
I mean, 2 years ago he was outstanding for them.
Yeah, he gets his hands on the ball too.
Yeah, so you're going to add to that room. So
No, you're definitely going to add to that room.
it's not awful.
The prediction I feel most confident about with the early picks in the draft is one's going to be a corner.
One of those first 3 picks is a cornerback.
Yeah, I mean, kind of how I phrased it to Jerry was someone on the first 2 days. But
Yeah.
the first 3 picks,
I
obviously.
don't
a little
think they
earlier than
wait
the
until
others.
80.
I don't either. I
Yeah.
don't either. Not a
But as
corner.
when we've done our different mock drafts, a lot of times when we get to 32, it's like, I don't know that I love those guys. But again, at 32, you're like, okay,
Yeah.
so he's not a first round guy.
Right. And I think there'll be a quality one there in the mid-second round.
Yeah, that's the other part of the
Real
equation.
confident
This
about
draft
that.
is so deep. I think I saw something Mel Kiper put out that he thinks there'll be, I want to say it was like 40 cornerbacks out of this
Drafted.
draft that will play in the NFL.
Okay.
40.
Not a 7th rounder that doesn't make it in camp. Right. Wow, it's a big number.
It's a
And-
huge number.
Yeah, and I bet there's, just off the top of my head, 15 in the top 50, 12 in the top 50, something like that.
Sounds about right. Yeah,
Right.
15 certainly in the top 75.
Yeah, and one of them probably to Pittsburgh.
Yeah. Hey, you can subscribe now to The Drive. Every episode we do is available for you to download. Subscribe today through the Steelers mobile app, the iHeartRadio app, or wherever you get your podcast. We're going to take a break. He is Matt Williamson. I am Dale Lolley. You're listening to The Drive on Steelers Nation Radio. We are live from the NFL owner meetings here at the Arizona Biltmore in Phoenix. We'll be back with more right after this.
Let's go play.
Welcome back. I am Dale Lolley. He is Matt Williamson, and this is The Drive. We are live from the NFL meetings here at the Arizona Biltmore here in Phoenix, and lots of news coming out of it.
Oh, is there? Yeah.
Absolutely. Robert Saleh this morning
Guess every coach talk, there's
Okay.
stuff to report.
confirmed that the Jets have an interest in Odell Beckham.
Their receiver situation is bonkers to me.
Yeah, this keeps signing. It's almost like Jacksonville a year ago. Like,
Yeah, right.
Just get rid of all these guys and bring in a whole bunch of new guys.
It's like we
and-
like Garrett Wilson, but everyone else is going to go, and we're going to bring in a whole new group other than that, which is crazy to me. It wasn't a bad group.
No, I didn't think so either. But apparently they weren't sold on those guys, and
Mhm.
so more moves on the way.
Maybe Mr. Rogers has something to do with it, too.
Yeah, could be. John Harbaugh said he doesn't know if Lamar Jackson would play on the franchise tender, but he says he's thinking about Lamar Jackson as his quarterback. It's a tough situation.
It's so tough. I mean, we talked about it earlier. I mean, he requested a trade. I mean, I didn't hear the word demanded,
Yeah.
but it sounds like, hey, trade me. I mean, but how do you work out that compensation? How do you work out his contract? How many teams would really be in it? I mean, does that change the availability of Lamar from yesterday? I don't know. And,
Yeah.
I mean, hey, no one here feels for the Ravens, but they're in a bind.
A little bit of a bind, yeah.
Yeah.
So if we were going to put odds on it, if I say, Matt, as we sit here today, it is
Let me throw this one out.
March 27th.
Do you want the Ravens as Lamar's team or the field?
I think I might go field.
I'd take the field
Yeah.
and probably pay 2-1. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I think that's probably the obvious choice.
Yeah, which is just strange to think about.
It's hard to fathom. But, I mean, just short term, the thing I keep coming back to, which is more Steeler related, is who could the Ravens quarterback be? I mean, maybe
Really,
you trade him to
yeah.
a team and get somebody back, but they're not going to give you someone equal to Lamar. Why would they upgrade? Or, you know, I mean, maybe a Ritter, maybe a Howell.
I mean, unless
you know,
unless you're hoping to get another first round draft pick out of this, that you can then maybe trade up and get one of those other guys. But
can you get to the fourth pick off Indianapolis in some way, shape, or form? I mean, maybe you don't get two first, you just get the fourth.
maybe
At
this
least
is something that happens
But even so, then
during the draft.
it could be right. I mean, but even so, I mean, the Ravens are a lot less threatening with Richardson or Levis than they
Without
are
a doubt.
Lamar.
Without a doubt.
right?
They're
For
definitely
especially-
take a step
maybe
back.
not 4 years from now.
So
but
when
now
you,
they
yeah,
are,
right, it definitely hurts their 2023 outlook.
in a big way. I mean, I don't know how they could possibly be better or equal at quarterback this year from the Lamar era.
Yeah, I mean,
I think it's impossible.
yeah. The other part of the equation, I've mentioned this a number of times,
And
if
they're
the-
like the most quarterback-dependent team in the league.
and the longer this draws out, they got a new offense coordinator.
What's he doing as we speak?
When even if Lamar is back with the Ravens, when does he sign that franchise tender? When is he back practicing with the team?
Right.
How does their new offense coordinator even draw anything up at this point?
Right. What's already hurt them? I mean,
Yeah,
maybe they draft Addison or Quentin Johnston or a guy like that. They still have their pick, the ability to add receivers. Maybe they convince Odell Beckham. Whatever. I'm thinking pie in the sky for them. But they have been unable to do anything because they have to have X amount of dollars tied up in him.
you got the $32 million that you have to account for on your salary cap.
Yeah, right. I mean, maybe they would have signed Myers or
Yeah.
Juju or
So even if he goes out and signs a contract with somebody else that's, let's say, $45 million a year, you got to match it.
you're gonna match
So
it
now you
or-
need more cap space.
right.
available.
You have to keep a lot of your money in the bank. You know, you can't. You're just not a liquid organization right now. And they could use pass rush. They've lost an offensive lineman or two. They need
And
receiver.
they
in a
only
big
have
way.
5 draft picks this
and
year.
they don't have the wealth of picks as usual.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a little tight.
It's a little tight. So if I ask you right now, as we sit here again, March 27th, do the Steelers finish ahead of the Ravens in the AFC North?
I was going to ask you, do you think the Ravens are fourth?
Without Lamar, I think they
I
are.
think, the way it's. I mean, their paths to getting to 1 or 2, I think, are really narrow right now.
Yeah,
I
and
mean-
so again, when you start looking at futures and things of that nature, there's still so much that has to play out with this.
There's so much play out. And Jerry had a good point, too. He's like 362 days ago or 367 days ago it was, the Steelers signed Edmonds. And I think Tyreek Hill was chief
Yeah.
1 year ago. I mean, there's big things. A.J. Brown was definitely a Titan.
Yeah.
A lot of that stuff, all the draft day trades that happened.
Yeah,
Devontae Adams was a Packer.
Some other things from this morning or this meetings. John Lynch said they will listen to, they being the 49ers, they'll listen to anything, but we like Trey Lance on our team.
So I heard some good. I was actually listening to a podcast.
So would
this
they
morning.
be a team that maybe Baltimore talks to if something happens with Lamar? And
From what I understand, Purdy is far away.
yeah,
and
that's the problem.
Immediately went on and signed Darnold. I don't think Purdy's in the mix. I was told whenever the GM went from the Titans' new GM went from the Niners organization that there was interest in Tennessee going with Willis and Lance, which would make some sense. But then the Niners would say, well, we got to start Darnold until Purdy's ready, which I think maybe is why they did that.
Yeah.
They have 3 potentially able-bodied guys. The only thing I know for sure is Lance is way further along in his recovery than
Right.
Purdy is. Like, they think Lance will be ready. You invested so much in him, I guess you roll that way.
Yeah,
It wouldn't shock me if Darnold's the opening day starter, though.
it would not one bit.
Yeah.
And
I was told Shanahan was infatuated with Darnold coming out of school. But there's a lot of tape since then that's not so infatuating.
Yeah, I mean,
You know?
it's like saying, I really used to be a big Eddie Murphy fan, but his last 6 movies have been bombs.
Right,
Like,
right. Yeah, the
don't
last
want-
couple albums haven't been so good. Yeah, right.
Sean Payton said Jared Stidham can become an NFL starter. He was an important signing for us.
They did that right away, too.
Yeah.
I mean, you run out and grab a quarterback the first day or two of free agency. You had one targeted, like Darnold, and every move that Denver's made has basically said, Russ, we're preparing for life without you or you being a good player. We're going to run the football like crazy. We grabbed a backup / developmental
Guy that we think is an NFL starter.
Yeah. And I think the Raiders thought that they would get Stidham back easily. And I think people around the league like him more than people think.
Yeah. Also, there's a report out there that DeAndre Hopkins has received permission from the Cardinals to seek a trade.
Okay. I
What-
think he gets traded. I
what
just don't
is
know.
he at this point?
That's the thing. I mean, his game will fade away slow. I mean, he's never been.
He's like the old guy that you play basketball
Yeah.
against at the rec center.
Puts
who-
his elbows in you the right
Yeah.
way and
Ball
hard to
fakes and
move
all that
right,
stuff,
Right,
and- yeah.
crafty. He reminds me of Larry a little bit at the end of his career.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't have to run great. He knows every trick in the trade. There's a lot of teams that could use him,
But it's like a $17 million cap hit.
and you're right. And you have to factor this in. I mean, it was just last year, right, that he was suspended for PEDs.
Actually, it's a non-guaranteed compensation package of $19.45 million
Wow.
for a guy who turns 31 on June 6th.
Wow, that's my birthday. Me and D-Hop, we got a lot in common. I turned 50 on June 6th. So, I don't know. I mean, how about Carolina? Draft the kid first overall. You have so much
Future cap space.
future cap
Yeah.
space. 3rd-round pick. I think C.J. Stroud would say thanks.
Yeah, yeah.
Ravens.
That's
Or
a team that's
like all
That's
in.
a team that's been linked to him a lot.
Right.
But again, if you don't have Lamar, are you in on, and you
Then
already,
do you want a short-term fix?
and you don't have a lot of draft picks to begin with,
Mm-hmm. You giving
gonna-
up thirds or whatever
Yeah.
for him. Yeah, it's
and
questionable
the
too.
cap hit.
Yeah, I mean, I bet the Bears are out of it. Think about teams that have money: Giants, Bears, Panthers, teams like that. I don't know. I mean, would you go all in if you're Buffalo or the Chiefs or a team like that?
I
don't
don't
know
think
the
the
Chiefs
Bills.
have to.
I don't think the Bills could afford him.
I don't know how they get them under.
You can't have 2 receivers making $50 million.
Yeah, and look at some of the receiver trades this year. Those guys didn't go for much.
Yeah, it's
I
not
mean,
like last year.
No, you're not getting as much in return for some of these guys as people think. I mean, I think he's a 3rd-round pick trade.
Yeah,
maybe
but well,
on
with
draft
that
day, right.
salary, it might,
With that
not- might not
salary,
even
his
be that
age.
high.
Right. He got suspended last year. I mean, one more PED.
He gets banged for the year.
And he's banged for the year, and then you bought nothing.
Yeah, that's the tough part of that one
Mm-hmm.
because you would have to be very sure that that's not going to happen again, and I don't know that you can be very sure of that.
Right. I mean,
He could say it was an accident or whatever, but you don't know.
you just know. I mean, I don't know his situation. I'm not calling him out. But when older players get banged for PEDs, I immediately go, he thinks he needs that to stay at the level he was, and he knows better than I do. I don't know, but it's funny. We had a Cardinals guy on our podcast like 2 months ago. I brought up the Hopkins. He's like, oh, we'll get a first for Hopkins. And even then I was like, maybe. Now it's like, you're not getting close
not
to
getting
a
a
first.
first.
I mean, you might get a third.
That's what
that team's a
he's-
disaster
yeah.
too.
Oh,
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
going to be really bad this year.
They are going to be super bad.
Super bad this year.
yeah.
And Kyler could miss a ton. of
Faux
time.
show.
Yeah.
But yeah, lots of interesting stuff coming out of these meetings here as we trickle through what came out of all the talks. From
Still
this
no
morning.
Rodgers news either, huh?
How about this one from Bill Belichick? We'll play our best player at quarterback.
Okay. I mean,
Who else do they got?
Bailey Zappi. I mean, he performed kind of. He's not for me.
No.
I don't love either one of them, to be honest with you. But I think I could see why Belichick would say that. Just because, hey, Mac, you didn't have a great job. Don't come into camp thinking I'm the man. This is
Stop yelling at my sideline.
Right. And they didn't exactly do him a lot of favors with who were on that sideline.
They
Don't
did
get me
not.
wrong,
They
but
did
still.
not. No, for sure. That was something that we talked about at length last year. The hubris of going into a season without an offensive coordinator
Right,
at
we'll
the
just
NFL
string it
level.
together with a bunch of coaches that haven't ever done that.
We're going to have my former defensive line coach is going to call offensive plays.
But I
Because
don't
he was a
know-
head coach before.
Right, and he's really smart or whatever. But I don't know that Mac Jones has the cachet to be I'm the starter or deserves that after last year.
Maybe you're trying to light a little bit of a fire under him, but I just don't see Bailey Zappi as the guy who's pushing him.
And the fans love him. I mean, he can do no wrong.
Well, they all think that they're getting the next Tom Brady.
Right.
That
He
happened
doesn't
once.
Throw the ball very well.
Once.
Right.
Doesn't happen again.
They'd be in trouble with Bailey Zappi.
Yeah. Are they any good?
Would you want Lamar if you're them?
That's a team that I've heard.
I've heard, yeah.
Suggested
I've also heard
that-
Hopkins' name there.
Yeah, suggested that maybe Belichick is. He's
I've been up in age. I've had the defensive coordinate against this guy many times, and I hate it. Send Mac Jones to Baltimore with a couple picks. Just do it all differently.
But I think there's still some animosity there between the two organizations.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
I mean, that would be like the Steelers making a trade with the Patriots. It's just not happening.
I hear you. I mean, Harbaugh and Belichick going to have
But could they wait until after the draft and then sign him?
They'd make an offer sheet to him or whatever.
Yeah.
Thinking they'll be both mid-first round pick types, or even do it now. That's not their pick this year's not that late or not that early.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, if they're not thrilled with Mac and Belichick's like, I got 3 more years. I'll take my chances with him as opposed to my guys. I can see it.
And you see what
And you look at
everybody
that
else in that
division.
division is doing.
That's the toughest division in the league.
Well,
especially Rodgers.
We said that last year about the AFC West too. Everybody said it about the AFC West, and
right.
it turned out to not be true.
Very much so. I mean, 3 of the 4 teams disappointed. I mean, I think the Chargers were slightly disappointing. The other 2 were very disappointing.
Very disappointing.
The other one won the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
But it looks awful competitive.
It sure does.
Right.
It sure
Especially
does.
if and when the Jets get Rodgers.
Without a doubt. I mean, if and when that happens.
Yeah.
At some point.
I'm assuming it does. I mean, if it doesn't, what are they going to do?
Or he goes off on another retreat and decides.
Yeah, he
that
might just say, I'm done. I don't know. Right. Go to a dark room for a while or host Jeopardy or whatever you don't have to do. But that needs to happen soon, too.
Yeah, without a doubt. Hey, you can subscribe to SNR's newest podcast, The Godfather of Pittsburgh Sports is Talking Nothing But Steelers. It's Savrin on Steelers. New episodes drop every Tuesday and Thursday. Subscribe today. They're available on the Steelers mobile app, the iHeartRadio app, and wherever you get your podcasts. He is Matt Williamson. I am Dale Lolley. We are live from the NFL meetings here at the Arizona Biltmore in Phoenix. We'll be back to finish off the show right after this. Welcome back. I am Dale Lolley. He is Matt Williamson, and this is The Drive on Steelers Nation Radio. We are back here to finish up what's been a productive 3 hours.
Yeah, it's been
here.
fun.
Lots
good
of
guests.
stuff
Right, yeah.
going on here. A couple other things here of note, Matt, here from the owners' meetings at the Arizona Biltmore. Robert Saleh said today that he is sure that Aaron Rodgers will be a Jet.
Okay.
That is interesting.
It's interesting. Yeah.
You don't usually hear a head coach talk about somebody who's under contract with another team like that.
Yeah, you don't, and I don't know if he could get himself in trouble for that. With the league, who's to say? I don't know that off the top of my head, but it sounds like that's kind of the definition of tampering. I don't know. But what we were talking about off the air, though, is I think it's wonderful to say, hey, we love this guy. We can't wait for him to be here. It's a done deal. But he's a Green Bay Packer. He's not a Jet.
Yeah.
I mean, can Coach Tomlin say Lamar Jackson's going to be a Steeler? That's, you just don't hear that stuff.
Yeah.
And it feels like the Jets are just competing against themselves. I mean, if I'm the Packers, I'm like, well, that's going to cost you an extra third-round pick now.
Yeah, right.
What other options do you have?
The price is the price.
Yeah,
And you're
right.
either going to meet their price or you're not. I don't know what the.
I think they're giving the Packers too much power.
Yes,
And
that's
you're
a good way to
negotiating.
put it.
Right,
You're-
right,
you're-
right. And you're
You know,
setting
you're
them up
walking
to,
in to buy the new car. You walked
like,
into.
I only want that one.
Yeah,
and
you
I'm
walked
paying
into
full
the
sticker
dealership,
price, right.
or you rode your bicycle in and said, "I really need a
Right, right.
car, and
Yeah,
that's the
you
only one
Ubered
on the
there.
lot, and we're going to take that one."
Yeah.
Well, what do you think's going to happen?
And I got to get to my daughter's recital in an hour.
I got an
Yeah,
hour
right,
to get
right.
this deal done.
And
Let's
that's
do
the
it.
only one on the lot I want, and I want it to be purple with green seats. Right?
The car dealer, the salesman's sitting there going, "Okay, I can pretty much charge this guy whatever I want."
Whatever I want. You're going to pay full sticker and a little more, sir. It just seems like what
My
the
daughter
Jets are-
needs
what
braces.
What they assigned Lazard and made all these moves.
Yeah,
that
you've
they
already,
didn't-
yeah.
Yeah. Or
uh,
maybe in an hour they say they traded 2 second-round picks for Rodgers. I mean,
Who knows?
I think
Yeah.
that actually was part of the Elijah Moore deal. Is I know that they burned bridges, Elijah Moore and the Jets. And when I saw that deal, I thought maybe the Jets are just taking their hand of playing cards and shuffling them up so they have different stuff to offer the
They
Jets.
wanted that extra third-round pick.
The 2 seconds.
Yeah,
You
I'm
know
sorry,
what I mean?
the 2
Right,
seconds.
right.
Yeah.
Instead of, hey, we are not giving you the first pick, but we'll give you 2 2s and a conditional next year. That sounds a lot better than a second, third, and a conditional next year. I mean, that was one of my thoughts, was maybe they're setting themselves up to make the final offer to get Rodgers.
Yeah. Sean McDermott said he's going to call the Bills' defense in
That always scares
2023.
me. I mean, their defense has been great without him being, and their defense coordinator is well respected. He's done a great job in his career. I always think with head coaches get involved, your game day stuff suffers.
I think they're all involved to a
They're all
certain
involved,
degree.
right,
yeah,
right,
I mean,
right.
you're going to do what the head coach wants you to do, and he's
Mhm.
going to have veto power over whatever you do.
Yes. But it's different calling plays, because the second the ball, they blow the whistle on play number 1, I got to get nickel in. I got to get my pass rushers in, and here's the play call. And I'm not calling timeouts or talking to my O-line coach about my injured left tackle or doing head coach stuff. I just think the job as head coach on game day is big enough as it is.
Yeah, so we'll see how that goes. Just looking here, Brandon Staley said Austin Eckler has the respect of the Chargers, but he is, of course, seeking a trade as well. There's some
feel bad for
high-profile guys seeking
Mhm.
trades here.
It's funny, if you go back and look at Eckler's career earnings, he's an undrafted guy to like Northern Colorado or some
Oh, if
Colorado.
you're a
mining
running
guy.
back and you don't go in the first round,
Right. And he's been phenomenal.
it's the worst deal in. Like, you're going to
Right.
make like $2 million
And I think
when
he's
they
up to,
beat the
like,
heck out of you,
Yeah.
and
I
then
think he's up to, like,
they're going to
6
say,
now.
"Well, we don't want to pay you."
Yeah, and they did give him extension after making league minimum undrafted stuff, but I think he's making like $6 million a year. He's their most important player, or Herbert aside. I
Yeah.
mean, they've leaned on him. He's been way past expectations. He deserves way more, and he probably won't get it. Like, I bet how this happens is, these guys came to a conclusion, and they'll somehow give him a couple million on the side, and he'll be happy, or trade him for a third-round pick and draft Bijan Robinson or Gibbs, or I mean,
Yeah.
it just
The-
he's
the-
up in age.
Yeah, I was going to say the problem is that he's a little older than what people may think. I mean,
Right.
He's already 27. He turns 28 in May.
Yeah, so it's his year 28 season.
That's usually when you start looking at not paying a running
27 is always the magic number.
Yeah.
Of, okay, it's going to be downhill from here. And he's not the biggest guy, and they've done a really poor job, despite some effort, Spiller and some of these other dudes, Kelly. They've used a lot of fifth-round picks on bigger backs to lighten his load, but none of them have been good enough.
Well, and here's the problem. So, okay, last year he catches 107 passes,
Scored like a million touchdowns.
722 yards. He had 18 touchdowns. He had 12 touchdowns the year before, 20 overall with what he does as a receiver.
He's phenomenal.
If I'm looking at him like Christian McCaffrey
Right.
light. Or maybe not even light.
Yeah, maybe the same tier.
Maybe that same tier, but
he might be one of the best 20 football players on the planet right
yeah,
now.
he's never rushed for 1,000 yards.
Right. He's a certain type.
Yeah, but
I mean, how many games does he play? I know you've stats on I don't think he's missed many.
Last year was 17. The year before was 16. It was only 10 in 2020, but he played 16 in 2019.
I mean, for a running back, he's been durable.
He's been durable, yeah.
He's been ultra productive, and he'll never come close to making what he deserves.
Yeah.
Not
You're
even
talking
close.
about a guy that's scored, 38 touchdowns the last two seasons.
Last 2 seasons. Right.
38
He might be
touchdowns.
the first pick in fantasy this year. And he's going to make nothing. Yeah, and if they trade him, they'll get a third-round pick for him or something. And
Yeah.
I feel for him. Rarely do I feel for athletes and whatever, but he's in a terrible situation because he's a potential Hall of Famer. I mean, like I think that's a stretch, but I mean
Yeah.
his body of work is tremendous, and he's always outkicked his contract by a mile.
I mean, he had 204 rushing attempts last year and 107 catches. So he had 311 touches.
And found the end zone over 20 times or whatever too. Right.
I mean,
on an offense that was struggling, and he was their best offensive player,
without a doubt.
including Herbert.
Yeah.
He was their best player on offense, and he's not going to get anything for it.
Yeah, I don't know what you do with that. And I can understand his frustration.
Very.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of the few times where I'm like, man, that poor dude. I mean, he's done way more than asked of him.
But if you're the Chargers, can you afford to let him go?
No. I mean,
Because even let's say you draft Bijan Robinson in the first round.
yeah. Well, then I would let him go.
Is he going to catch 107 passes for you next year?
No, but at least I've got a stud back for 5 years. You know what I mean?
I get it,
Or
but
maybe
I mean,
Jahmyr Gibbs or
yeah.
you know.
So
I don't know. That one's. I just think the player is going to get the short end of the stick. when
it's
all said
that
and done.
balance. I look at the running back position, and there's got to be some kind of
Right.
middle ground there at that position that
Yeah.
you can find where no, don't ever draft one in the first round unless he's this guy.
Yeah.
And don't ever pay him. Just keep cycling through. Well, unless he's this guy.
I mean, no one seems to be complaining about McCaffrey, and I think
Right.
if you're a weapon like Eckler or McCaffrey, you're worth paying. I mean, maybe not $20 million a year, but more than the franchise tag of 10 or 11.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, we haven't talked a ton about that, man. Let's finish up the show by doing this. The Steelers running back position.
yeah,
You've got Najee Harris. You've got Jaylen Warren. I think you've got your 1-2 punch.
I think so.
In terms of what you have there, do you look at Najee Harris and say what he did in the second half of last season, that's who he is moving forward? Or are you?
Yeah, but I mean, everyone looks at Najee like he's a young guy, and he is. This is year 3 already.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like it doesn't. Pretty soon, it's do you pick up the 5th-year option? Do you franchise him? I mean, he didn't come in the league young. I mean, and that's unfortunately the nature of the position. They don't have a long shelf life. My thoughts on the running back position is, I like the top 2. I'm still interested in what McFarland might bring to the table. I would like to add another, especially in a deep running back class, and that might even be a priority free agent that you should have got drafted but didn't this year. Bring in 2 of them like you did with Warren or whatever. I just don't know if I want Snell or if I want Sproles. Like you're shorting Danny Smith if you don't give him a Snell as your third back that's a quality special teamer. Maybe it even is Benny Snell. But the team lacks explosion. I wouldn't mind somebody like McFarland, being that third guy too. That's also maybe a returner, or get him 5 touches a game as a satellite back. So
Yeah,
I don't know what
I'm
style
intrigued
I'd
by
be
what I
after.
saw last year of McFarland
too.
in the one game that he played last year. And people need to understand he was on the practice squad and inactive on the wasn't on the 53-man roster because of Benny Snell's special teams play.
He wasn't in the doghouse.
No,
Right,
no.
right.
I mean,
I think his stock's higher now than at any point in his Steeler career.
it very well may be.
That they trust him a little more, and he understands how to run in this league, and he is talented.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely something there.
Mhm.
But you just have to figure out how to use him.
And the special teams thing's big. I mean, if your third back is not helping on special teams, you're shorting your special teams coordinator.
Yeah,
a little
because
bit.
the problem then becomes what happens if something were to happen to Najee Harris.
Mhm.
Well, Jalen Warren's one of your core special teams guys.
Right.
But if
probably
he's now your
taken
lead,
off
if
special teams.
yeah, if he's now your lead running back,
Mhm.
you're not going to play him on special teams.
And who's the two? And right,
Yeah.
right. I think that third back situation is interesting, and maybe you bring a banger and a dynamic guy to camp that are undrafted or late picks and just keep the best dudes and try to keep the rest on the practice squad
Yeah,
and realize
yeah.
those guys get hurt.
Yeah, because I mean, right now Derek Watt's not on this team.
Mhm.
Connor Hayward can be
Can do stuff.
Can play that special teams role.
Yes.
I know Warren can play that special teams role. Killebrew can play that special teams role.
Hmm. But you also don't have the Boykin, or
Right,
that
you don't
type
have
of
that
dude.
guy.
And those guys will find themselves.
Right. Can Mark Robinson play a bigger role in that? Oh, you would hope so.
You would hope. I mean, now you hope. Presumably, he'll be active on week 1, where
Yeah.
he didn't get active till like 15 or whatever this
Yeah,
past
yeah.
year. I think bringing back Pierre is huge in that regard. He was,
Right.
Killebrew is going to probably make the team as your fourth safety, not your third.
Right.
And maybe that third guy, if it's your third round pick, is a core special teamer, safety. Probably a first round corner isn't. You know what I mean?
Unless he's a gunner.
Unless he's a gunner.
Yeah.
I do think Roberts will be heavily involved in special
Yeah,
teams.
yeah. He's done that
He
over
has
the
a
course of
history
his
it,
career.
right?
Yeah. So
But
it's interesting.
That stuff always has to work itself out down the road.
Nobody thinks about that when
No.
signings are made or when rosters are put together.
Right.
They just cut that guy. You don't need that guy.
Who cares
He's a-
about him?
You cut that guy, and Danny Smith's going to go nuts.
Right. He plays every special teams for you. And I think Boykin has a point to come back. I mean, is he a great receiver? No, but he doesn't kill you as
But
a
he's
receiver.
a
and he's
very
active
good
on
special
game day.
team. Yeah,
Right.
very good special teams.
He
player.
really proved a lot on special teams.
Yeah. So you need to have those guys too, and it's never a problem until it's a problem.
I mean, your fifth receiver, third running back, one of those two has to be a special teamer, if not both.
Yeah.
And good at it.
And really good. Yeah.
Yeah,
Can't
I mean,
just be we put him out there, but he's
Right.
okay.
But he can't really tackle anybody. right.
No, he better be excellent.
really good at it, like one of the best on the team.
Yeah.
And they probably didn't do that in college.
Yeah, but I feel pretty good overall about what they have coming back at running back. So
Yeah.
I think and
That might be next year's need, though. I mean, if you're already going into year 4 with Najee, when we sit here a year from now, I might be like, well, maybe they need a third-round pick there.
yeah,
I don't know.
potentially.
They
Or
just don't last.
those are plug and play though.
Yeah. I mean, it's small potatoes.
Yeah, it's nice now that you have a year's difference between Warren
Mm-hmm.
and Harris, even though they're basically the same age.
Yeah, I don't think there'll be big moves there. Probably not in the next 365 days either.
Yeah, unless somebody gets hurt.
Right.
Which
I mean, I don't think they're trading for Eckler, though. Or,
no,
or
no,
something like
that's
that.
not happening.
Right.
Steeler fans.
Right.
That's-
And it's appealing to be a
Oh,
better team
absolutely.
with them, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
or
he's a
drafting
weapon.
Bijan Robinson. like,
Right.
We ran into that with a mock draft that we did last week or 2 weeks ago. We get to the second round and Bijan Robinson's there at 32.
32.
I mean, he's by far the best player still available,
Yeah.
but
I think you look at that and say, well, then maybe 3 extra teams. Are
Somebody
calling
else
you to
is
trade.
calling you, yeah.
Right.
so
Dallas or whoever.
yeah, I mean that's
It's
just,
it's don't let your kids grow up to be running backs.
which is crazy.
It's so
it's
crazy.
crazy.
And
Like that's where you want your kids. If you're on the high school, oh my son's
he's
a
the
running
best
back.
guy, right? He's
Yeah.
getting the ball more than anybody else. Or back when we were growing up, there was always a back drafted in the top 5.
Yeah,
Your superstar, Marcus Allen, Dickerson, all those type of dudes, or high picks, Dorsett.
Yeah, it's
now
crazy.
they might not be first.
Crazy. That's going to do it for the show today.
Yeah, it was
Matt.
fun.
Yeah. So if you missed any of our show today, you can download full episodes of all of our SNR podcasts, shows such as The Drive, In the Locker Room with Wolf and Starks, The Steelers Blitz with the Wes and Moats, The Steelers Standard with Tom and Jacob, as well as many more. They're all available on the Steelers mobile app, the iHeartRadio app, and wherever you get your podcasts. Also, a reminder, you can watch this show, rewatch this show later today on the Steelers YouTube channel.
Yeah.
We'll be doing this again tomorrow as well. So check that out there. Subscribe to the channel. There's lots of good content on there. But for my partner, Matt Williamson, for CJ back in studio keeping us on the air, I'm Dale Lolley. We appreciate you listening to this edition of The Drive on Steelers Nation Radio.
This is
Clear.